All right, we got the green light. Welcome to the January 24th Planning Commission meeting. Jackie, roll call.
Here.
Here.
Present.
Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Mattel.
Here.
Commissioner Neverov.
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Berube.
Here.
Chair Olson.
Here. Thank you, Jackie. The next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting agenda. Were there any changes or motion to approve?
I move approval of the meeting agenda as submitted.
Okay, second.
I'll second that.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Motion approves. The next item is approval of the January 10th, 2018 Planning Commission minutes. Again, any edits to that or motion to approve?
I move approval of the previous meeting minutes as submitted.
Second. Second, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries, thank you. Next on the agenda is under special recognitions and presentations is the Greater Southdale Area Study Update.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. As you know, we're working on the Southdale Area Plan as part of the comprehensive plan, and members of the working group are making their way around to each of the commissions to provide an update. So it's the Planning Commission's turn this evening. And so with us, we have two members of the work group, Don Hutchison and Jim Nelson are here this evening, and they're going to make a short presentation, update you where we're at with that study. So with that, I believe it's Mr. Hutchinson is going to kick it off.
Welcome.
All right. Is this on? Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Teague, Ms. Idness, good evening, public. My name is Don Hutchison, and I'm an appointed member by the City Council, appointed as a member of the Southdale Area Work Group, and I'm also a resident of the Southdale area, and I work in the Southdale area, so I have a great interest in it. Southdale area, as you may know, is about 700 plus acres, and it has evolved dramatically over the last 70 years since Southdale Center began initially as an idea and then was brought into being through really a combination of vision, generosity, business savvy, public-private cooperation and collaboration, great leadership, not to mention a great location. And the evolution that's going to take place over the next 70 years in the future promises to be head-turning for those of us alive today and for those yet to be born. Concern and disagreement over proposed development of real estate parcels in the 7200 block of France several years ago led the city to create the Southdale Area Work Group, of which I'm a member. And Michael Schroeder, who is a former member of the Planning Commission, and Colleen Wolf, both of them are Cornelia residents, and she is a businesswoman. They are co-chairs of the group and have been co-chairs since the beginning. The group formed in the year 2016, I believe, and it has sorted its work into three phases, conveniently referred to as Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. And Phase 3 is where we are right now, and specifically, Phase 3 is for us as a group to take the lead in drafting the small area portion of Edina's 2018 comprehensive plan update. Now, at 700 acres, let's see, is it the right hand? At 700 acres, Southdale's an area larger than the downtown core of Minneapolis. So there's very little debate that this is not really a small area. but it's a bit larger than that. Due to its proximity and connectedness, we're also looking at the Pentagon Park area immediately to the west of France Avenue at the south end of the study area. So there's a little bit of scope creep in this regard, but we think it's good scope creep. I'm going to ask Jim Nelson, who many of you know and is a long-standing member of the community, to come up and just give you a brief update about the 2 phases that we've already completed, and then I'll pick back up and give you a little bit more of an update on the phase 3 that we're in now.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mr. Teague. Thank you, Don, for that very excellent synopsis of where we are as we are on the beginning stages of Phase 3. We are addressing our planning framework and future development guidelines for the greater Southdale area, which were the basic subjects of our first and second phases. My comments in the next few minutes will be focused on 3 items: the highlights of Phase 1, logically, Phase 2, logically, and a couple of brief comments on the experience of serving on the Southdale Work Group. Phase 1, the primary effort and result of Phase 1 was the development of a set of 9 working principles to be addressed by a developer in his or her submission of a proposed development plan or seeking recommendation to the city staff and the Planning Commission and ultimately approval by the City Council. A submission for approval should address any of the applicable principles for that project, and our process involved consideration and evaluation by the group, which eventually led to a report to the Planning Commission and City Council and the guidelines and standards to encourage quality and aspiration in design and emphasis on improving public realm, connectivity, and other aspects of development in the community were the focus. The 9 principles, and I'm not going to go through them all individually, they're readily available, but the principles were adopted by the City Council as a part of the application and approval process, and the development community has praised the 9 principles as a positive set of guidelines in its process of their submissions. I want to just pick about 3 of the guidelines that are kind of an example of what the 9 consist of. One of the most interesting ones, and probably the one about which we get the most questions, is what we refer to as the give to get in the planning process. And what we mean by that really is just like it sounds. It really involves the council giving consideration to more latitude than maybe is normal in a more prescriptive approach to achieving an enhanced quality or function that is aligned with the function of the district, the Southdale district. In other words, you do something for us, we'll do something for you. Another one that really has been a focus has been the focus on walkability and connectivity and attributes like that of a particular development plan. The connectivity involves really one that not only involves obvious connection opportunities, but we're talking about pedestrian opportunities and bicycle opportunities, transit opportunities to connect the area in a logical fashion and make access to the area more simple and more effective. And last but not least of the 3 examples are economic vitality. We think it's important to ensure every component in the example or in the economic vitality of the district and the community by the application of these principles. From the guiding principles to Phase 2, the purpose of Phase 2 was really twofold. One is to create a vision, not specific site development designs, but application of the principles to begin to establish a conceptual vision of the future of the area with the application of the principles to the development process to the benefit of the community. And we're talking about a placemaking process, which we had the assistance of Architectural Field Office, Mick Johnson and Sarah Crouch, two very well qualified, experienced people in planning. Again, it's a placemaking effort. It's a vision of the future. This is not something that's going to be an immediate development process, but one that's developed over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of redevelopment to help the district take shape over time. The other objective was one of mutual education. Communication and education both ways, both in terms of educating the constituencies in the community and educating those of us on the work group in terms of reaction to how we're doing and what's interesting, what suggestions did the public have. We really presented that process to three groups, to neighborhood groups, residents, to business owners and managers in Edina, and to the commercial real estate development and owners, developers and owners of property in Edina. It was a very positive, very constructive, interactive process, and it really provided dialogue that informed and benefited all participants on both sides of the coin. And finally, and last, as the senior member of the Southdale Group, and one who has been involved from the beginning, it's a great experience. It's really an education. And, but what I want to highlight is in this environment we live in today of antagonism, confrontation, being as hard to get along with as you can, this group is just the opposite of that. It's a very diverse group in terms of where they're coming from and what their backgrounds are, and not necessarily all a bunch of allies, but all the way along in the process, everybody has been respectful, positive, accepting, and thoughtful in their comments and in their discussions. It's a tribute to Michael Schroeder, our fearless leader, along with Colleen Wolf. Both of them are very well organized, very helpful, very active, and doing a lot of work. And to Carrie Teague, our staff representative, and Carrie, thank you from me and the rest of us. It's been great. And to our outside consultants, Mick Johnson and Sarah Crouch from Architectural Field Office, Dan Cornejo and Bill Smith from BICO, our outside consultants on the comprehensive plan process. And finally, thanks to the Planning Commission and the City Council for their support and encouragement as we've gone along. And Steve, we're going to miss you. You've been a super member of that group, and you're thoughtful and very constructive in your comments, and we look forward to welcoming another of you to be a part of that group. Thanks very much.
So we're here tonight to really give you an update, try to provide you with an overview of what we are going to be doing next, what we're doing now, to hopefully at the end of this get any questions or guidance or corrective direction from you, if there is such, in your minds and thoughts as you listen to this tonight. So if you take a look here, this is who we are as a group. The group includes individuals representing the business community, commercial property managers, representatives from adjoining neighborhoods, and members of the Planning Commission. Every member is, or at least was, a resident of Edina. One member, Julie Chamberlain, grew up and lived in the Cornelia neighborhood up until very recently, got married, now lives in downtown Minneapolis. We asked her to stay on because we actually value her contribution and her perspective very, very much. She's a very bright young woman, and thankfully she has stayed on with us. Ben Martin, as many of you know, did manage the Southdale Center up until this past fall. He's no longer with Simon Companies, has moved out of the state, and so he's no longer part of our group. As we just mentioned, Mr. Hobbs has served on the group since its inception, and we will definitely miss his perspective, his experience, his wisdom, his knowledge as we proceed with our work. And we're pleased to have Joanne Olson and John Hamilton also representing the Planning Commission, and hopefully another one of your members soon. We've engaged Beco Associates, an architectural field office. Jim just mentioned this, and what we made clear from the beginning is that we are looking to them to provoke us with questions, to challenge us with ideas, to help us to think about alternative viewpoints, provide information, provide expertise, and to assist us. But we are really not seeking their approval for the directions that the group is taking, and they're under clear direction not to shift into lecture mode, and so far so good. It's working out well. They are excellent and very collaborative, working with us as a group. One of the attributes of our work over the past 2+ years has been an openness and solicitation of input from the public. We have members of the community at large attending nearly every single meeting of our work group, and we've been impressed with their knowledge, their constructive engagement with our group. And during phase 2, we actually set up organized meetings to present to the broader public, neighborhoods, commercial and business interests, and the development community. We received their feedback, we incorporated it, and have appreciated that very much. As we're entering into phase 3 and the work on the comprehensive plan, there's a great deal of interest from those members of the public who are attending our meetings. They've responded very positively to what they're seeing, what they're hearing, and like some of the ideas that are being bandied about and discussed on the table for the future of the Southdale District. They've contributed great ideas about buffers, great ideas about transitions, about accessibility, walkability, greenness, sustainability. It's just excellent to have people there asking questions, challenging us, and encouraging us too. Our work is not intended to proscribe what will be in this location or in that location, or what it should specifically look like. We've had zero discussion about height and density. That's not our focus. Rather, we aspire really to create a vision and these principles that have been established so that a landowner, a developer, an architect might craft their proposals for future development to align with an adopted district long-term vision. Over the next 20 to 30 years, a figure I've heard is that this area could see $20 billion or more in new and renewed development. Now let's envision what that might look like. If you can visualize the scale and the walkability of 50th and France, and combine that with the really world-class quality of Centennial Lakes and the promenade, and combine those, I think that might give you an idea of what we could hope the entire Southdale District could be like and look like 20, 30, 50 years from now. We hope that our work on the comprehensive plan update will create that vision and help those creating the future. Now, the future is not foreseeable. I think we can agree on that, but the future that we want is more likely to happen if we create a vision and if we can create expectations as the area develops, as it fills in further. And this phase 3 effort is, in fact, to help put that vision eventually into policy. If you can visualize the area, York Avenue and France Avenue define the east and the west edges of the study area. We've discussed whether these major transportation arteries are borders or barriers, or if they should be viewed rather as seams. And to make Southdale work in our future, we need to figure out how to make them function as seams and not as borders or barriers. Tying together this district to neighboring Richfield, to the Cornelia neighborhood, to adjacent Pentagon Park as that develops, and actually to the Edina neighborhood just north of Crosstown Highway 62 will be important to keep in mind. There's a lot of coordination and a lot of communication that needs to take place with Hennepin County regarding, say, the library site and regarding transportation into, out of, and within the district, with the state regarding major arteries that feed and support the area, with the Met Council on a number of things, including such as sewer, with the watershed district regarding stormwater management. Now, we've met with, or as we're doing tonight, we'll be meeting with area or with community council committees and commissions. We'll be meeting and talking to the school district. We have a detailed schedule. We meet about every 2 weeks, and we're going to be coming back to this group in a couple of months to give you a further update with more detail. We hope to wrap up our Phase 3 work towards the autumn of this current year. I hope this update's been helpful. At a high level, I hope it helps you to understand the work that we're engaged in, and there's been hundreds of hours by volunteers in the community. And I think I've said enough. I would just again thank you, and we'll take any questions if you have any. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Don. Are there any questions for the Commissioner Lee?
I want to thank you for the summary. As you know, this is a critical year, and I was recalling, I think actually it was 2015 that we began this request, and it initially came about, if you recall, from a project at 7200 France. And at that time, I think our Planning Commission felt a real lack of sort of where to go in evaluating proposals that we knew were coming and have come since then. I seem to recall that the idea was to form a coalition that was equally represented by residents as well as the business community, because it is Southdale after all. And we were in a quandary that this project was proposed for the west side of France, which bordered some of our, it was the first one to border our residential neighborhoods. So I guess my thoughts to your group would be, in some ways, I'm a little concerned that there have been no guidelines other than guiding principles. Although I feel the guiding principles are excellent, they are far too broad to give any specific direction as to what the vision for Southdale really is going towards. And we are here and now, and we continue to get proposals here and now. And so the timeline puts it essentially, it sounds as though we're just waiting to get something by the end of this year, October, November. Is that right?
That is correct. The Phase 3 that we're in is to provide the formal input, the essentially to put the meat around the 2018 Comprehensive Plan update for the Southdale.
Well, I think when we started down this path, it wasn't the intent to come up with necessarily a small area plan or even tie it to a comp plan. It was really born out of the need that this Planning Commission needed some guidelines. And I understand the need, or at least the more metamorphosis of this becoming a greater vision now. 700 acres is significantly large. But I would, I guess I would just encourage you not to get hung up on the word small or area or plan even, but more that we're looking still for guidelines. So if there's any way that your working group could perhaps form a subset or smaller committee to summarize, at least for now, in this time and place, for what you know for the vision. What are the things that we need to consider when we see a proposal? It would involve things like density and height and use and where it should go in the district. And I think some of the plans that Mick Johnson has done are excellent. The problem is, right now, it's more or less a narrative. And the difficulty is, and you'll see this, is we continually have to have Mick interpret for us what he feels the current proposal, whether or not it meets it. And I think in some ways that takes away the judgment of the 9 people on this panel. If we had guidelines, we could each look at the guidelines ourselves, and from that be able to make some judgment and weigh it in terms of what we see and what we each bring to this commission. So I would encourage you to at least insert that in there and hopefully make it well before October. I don't mean to stop the process. I think what you've got going here is excellent. It's very much needed. But I am concerned that now you're adding Pentagon Park into it. And as you said, 700 acres, I think that's plenty big. Certainly something by now, there is some way to summarize that. So that would be my one plea and request to the working group.
Well, thank you very much for that input. We're actually meeting as a group tomorrow night. Jim and I will share that with the entire group, and of course several of the members of the group are here. Jim, would you want to add anything to that? He said no. So any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
No, thanks, Joanne. Don, Jim, thanks for your presentation tonight. And I think you guys have done a great job. You got a great team. This might be kind of a paraphrase of what what Sue said. Excuse me, Sue, Joanne. But one kind of the prism by which I would suggest that that the group approach things is, and this is kind of how I interpreted it before, and I don't know if we're still on this path, but what bad things could happen in this area if this working group did not exist, and how can the working group prevent those bad things from occurring? And what good things might happen in the area, but only because the working group exists? And how can the working group foster those good things from happening in the area? And I suspect if you were to take Mick's plan, at the end of the day, that's really what, that's not what he's addressing, but it does address those kinds of 2 main objectives, and keep everything in that filter, because I think you get back to the 7,200. I wasn't on the planning commission at the time, but my interpretation of what the conversations were is people thought, well, we don't really like this, and we need to come with a bigger plan to get less of the stuff we don't like and more of the stuff we do. And I think that's kind of what you're working for, but I would always keep those questions in mind. How is what we're doing here preventing something that we don't want to have happen? And how is it helping things occur that we do want to have happen?
Ian, thank you. I think those are excellent comments. I do think that in phase 1, the 9 principles, as good as they are, if they solved all the problems, we would have stopped and everybody would have said, thank you very much. We have the tools that we need. The principles are a great step. They are not adequate in and of themselves. So the next phase, phase 2, is what could, what might, what ought this Southdale area and its future development look like? And phase 3 hopefully will be responding as best we can to the question that you've asked us, what kind of tools, what kind of help might there be other than a beautiful picture and nice ideas and good phrases on paper? What will this look like? How will it work? And since we've never done it before, we're taking it a step at a time, but we're very encouraged. But I do understand that time doesn't wait and projects keep coming up and the solution isn't there tonight or 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now. And that's got to be a challenge and frustrating. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you. I would, go ahead. I think I wanted to add some comment too.
Well, thanks. I just wanted to thank Don and Jim for the very kind words, and I really have appreciated being on the Southdale group. It is really an amazing group of folks, and it has put in just hundreds of hours working on this. And I think one thing to remember in terms of what it is that we're trying to do and still trying to do is in trying to come up with some idea of how this area will function. You know, what are the components that we want in Southdale? And that takes a good deal of time. I think we all would love for it to go quicker than it does. But to really try to imagine what is the core of Edina, what is the core of the whole region, and how that might function, what components are necessary, is a tall task. And so I think we're well on the way to accomplishing that. And I am quite optimistic that this is going to come out at the other end with exactly what this community needs, what this planning commission needs to be able to create an area in Southdale that's going to be just an incredible asset for this whole area. So thanks again. I really appreciate being a part of the whole Southdale group.
Thank you, Steve. I was just going to add, I agree with everything you said, and I really see it's made a difference already with what we've been seeing coming through. It's really helped us, it's given us some guidance, and so, you know, I don't completely agree with, I know we have to get there, there's still more to do, but I think it's been phenomenal to have some of those principles and to give us the basis for making some of the decisions. So I think we've made great strides, and there's going to be more. Do you have anything else to add, John?
Yeah, I practiced architecture now for almost 50 years. And in that time, you see what the economy does, the way the world turns. It isn't linear by any stretch of the imagination. It moves in loops and overlapping circles. You can see it if you drive from downtown Minneapolis to Edina. You can see the years that development was healthy and the world responded in a positive way. You can see when the years when development didn't happen at all, and you can see the years when development was very, very tight, and the way things happened. And we're talking about a 40-year plan for Southdale, so to be prescriptive and say this is what it's going to be would not make a great deal of sense. But to set a framework like they did in San Antonio on Riverwalk and say this could be wonderful. Let's plant the seed of what wonderment might be, and let's be sure that we have the infrastructure in place so that when that wonderment shows up, when that investment capital comes to the table, it has a place to put down roots and grow. I think that's the challenge, and that's what the Southdale Area Plan is there for, to put down the framework, the guidelines for what can happen. And if we think we're going to make it happen in my lifetime, we're kidding ourselves. But in our kids and our grandkids, it can be something that is so extraordinary and so remarkable, I think, if we stay on course. It can make us all quite proud.
Anybody else? Any other comments? Great. Again, Don and Jim, thank you so much. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is a public hearing. It's an ordinance amendment for Chapter 36, rooftop restaurants and conditional uses in the R2 district.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks. Members of the Planning Commission, I'll take it from my seat here. So as you know, the City Council has authorized staff and the Planning Commission to consider a zoning ordinance amendment that would allow rooftop restaurants. We talked a little bit about it at our last meeting. This request comes to us as a result of the new Lifetime Fitness out at Southdale that's going in the JCPenney site. They'd like to do rooftop dining in that space. To provide a little background, back in 2011, the city took a look at the potential for allowing rooftop restaurants in the city. The Planning Commission at that time drafted an ordinance that would allow rooftop dining in the planned commercial districts 2 and 3. That would include 50th and France and the Southdale area. At that time, that ordinance was not accepted by the City Council, and actually a prohibition on rooftop restaurants went into effect. So the place we started with our discussion at our last meeting was taking that ordinance and refining it a bit. So that is the ordinance that is before you this evening. The ordinance would allow rooftop restaurants as a conditionally permitted use. So anytime anyone was proposing something like that, it would be reviewed by both the Planning Commission and the City Council. Based on your recommendation, too, we also included the PCD 1 district, so it's essentially all of our commercial zoning districts that would allow this. Some of the conditions that are outlined in the ordinance, one suggests a 100-foot setback from all residential uses. So that's an item that the commission might want to discuss this evening. Is that the right number or not? Back in 2011, the number was 50 feet. So as proposed with that 100-foot setback in the 50th and France area, as an example, rooftop dining or a rooftop restaurant would not be allowed at the Edina Grill or Salute. So just to provide a little perspective of what 100 feet would mean. It limits the hours of operation from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And again, that can be negotiated to be more restrictive potentially as part of that conditional use permit, depending on the circumstances. There is a sound limitation that's suggested, and this language again comes from 2011 that would not allow amplified sound to adjacent properties. That might be something that you want to consider too. We do have a decibel level ordinance that could come into effect if you wanted to potentially allow amplification. Again, that's from speakers to adjacent properties. The ordinance suggests that the outdoor dining area needs to be adequately screened. That would be on a case-by-case basis, where we would look at, adjacent uses and how would that be properly screened. Liquor license would be required if they're serving alcohol. Safety fencing around the perimeter per any building code requirements would be required. And they would need to also conform to our lighting ordinance standards. The one thing we did talk about a couple of weeks ago was in regard to, do we want to require additional parking? What was handed out, so the ordinance in 2011 did suggest a parking requirement. I did not include that in your original, in the ordinance that's before you, but it was again in that ordinance from 2011. The language that's been handed out, that was the language that was proposed back in 2011. So it reads, additional parking would be provided for rooftop restaurants if that area is larger than 20% of the square footage of the principal indoor restaurant in the building. So in that case, one additional space would be required, or one parking space would be required per 3 seats. That's our standard restaurant requirement. So I hand that out for your consideration if that's something that you want to add to the requirement. For on-the-ground outdoor seating, currently we do not require additional parking for those uses. So that was part of staff's thinking to not add additional parking, as we don't require that on the ground today, so to stay with that consistency. So with that, I will stop and answer any questions that you may have. And so the Planning Commission is asked to hold a public hearing this evening and make a recommendation to the City Council.
Thank you, Carrie. Are there questions for Carrie? Well, just sorry. Commissioner Berube.
Carrie, you mentioned that in this proposal, you've got 100 feet. And previously it was 50.
That was the recommendation, correct.
And why did you choose 100?
Part of the concern was when the ordinance failed back in 2011, there was concern from those the existing condominiums that were just built at that time at 50th and France in that separation. There was quite a bit of opposition to the ordinance from residents in that building, and I believe that led to some of the the reasoning that that was not accepted and adopted by the city council. So in putting the 100-foot limitation, it would prevent it in that district. Now, the use would be allowed if one of those restaurants were to propose outdoor dining, they could ask for a variance to that 100-foot standard. So at least there would be a process in place to consider it. So I guess that was the starting point. From the survey of cities that we did and that was provided in your packet, you can see there's a wide range of distances. Some cities had a 20-foot setback. To the most extreme, I think I saw a 200-foot setback. So I don't know that there's a magic right or wrong distance. Yeah.
Commissioner Strauss, did you?
Yeah, Director Teague, the hours limiting 7 to 10, and the city council may further restrict. So to this ordinance, permitted activity would never be allowed past 10 p.m., right? And if by further action it could be reduced from that, but it would never exceed in any case.
Correct.
Yeah, those hours. Okay.
As written here,
okay.
Yes.
And I think there was another one about a permanent bar. I mean, I'm assuming what they're talking about is something temporary be allowed on the rooftop then. I'm trying to see where I saw that. I'll come back to that. That's fine. Thanks.
Commissioner Lee.
All right, so Carrie, maybe I just wasn't paying attention. All right, can you explain again why there is this thing about the R1 to R2 thing in this resolution? Conditional uses in the R2 district.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry, I didn't mention that.
Oh, okay.
I did not say that, so thank you for reminding me.
Okay.
Part of the ordinance, too, is that we see this as kind of a housekeeping item. This came up as part of that rezoning request that we had a couple of meetings back on Macaulay Trail, where we have some language left over in the R2 zoning district that talks about additions to or potential tear-down rebuilds. This is in regard to our 1-foot rule. There was a time a few years back where there was a moratorium on variances in the whole state of Minnesota, so we could not process variances. We have a standard in our ordinance that says when you tear a home down, you can't rebuild it to have a first floor elevation more than 1 foot above the previous first floor elevation of the existing home. So we had some residents who were living on property where the groundwater was such that they couldn't do anything with their property. They couldn't build an addition because they couldn't meet that 1-foot rule. They wanted to tear their house down. So the way to get around the variance, we created this conditional use permit process that said you can tear your house down and rebuild and be above the 1-foot rule if you have water conditions. When the variance moratorium was lifted from the state, we pulled that language out of the zoning ordinance, but we didn't lift it out of the R2 zoning district. So it's left over. It was pulled out of the R1 district, but it's still in the R2, and it caused some confusion on whether a single-family home was allowed in an R2 district when we considered that rezoning about a month ago. So we're suggesting that that language simply be stricken from the ordinance.
Does it seem a bit confusing to kind of combine the two? To me, it's confusing, but have you done that? That is typical in the city process. If you're just passing a resolution, you can include whatever you want in it, even if they're unrelated.
Yep. When we've done
dining.
Okay. A few years back when we were tasked with doing a whole bunch of zoning ordinance changes, we would have 5-6 different zoning changes to different sections in the code. So to have actually just 2 here is not as many as we've had in some instances.
Commissioner Nemeroff.
Thanks, Joanne. So Carrie, Emily Boddicker did great work collecting all this metro data on rooftop dining, and I believe that some of the other cities would say, "Hey, let us see the summary of that." It was excellent, and I was pretty impressed by all the cooperation by metro area planning departments on that. I don't know if I've ever seen such a mass positive response to a general request for information. That's something about the collegiality in your profession.
We like to help each other out with ordinance changes, yes.
There's so many interesting ideas in here, but one that I saw that I wanted to ask you about was the city of Wayzata requires the property, the business to enter into a hold harmless agreement with the city. I have a two-part question. One is, do you know why they do that for this kind of use? And two, is that something that Edina would be interested in for this kind of use?
I'm taking a guess here, but I'm thinking that they're doing some outdoor dining in publicly owned space or public right-of-way, and they're looking to cover themselves on that in that area.
I don't know. So, maybe it might be something just worth looking into. We can always revisit this later. I was thinking there was something unique about the uses in Wayzata that could create more risk. You're by the lake, people are coming in from a day on the boat, and we all know what that means socially. They used to be very busy train tracks running right by their downtown area. I knew someone that had a terrible accident on those train tracks. So maybe I'm thinking it had something to do with that maybe it's a unique condition that doesn't exist in Edina. So
sure, I could have the city attorney weigh in if that's some language that we might want to add.
It may be relevant specifically to Isaiah, but I thought that was an interesting thing. It's a smart city. They do a lot of great development there, and so they might be thinking of something unique. But that was my question on that one. Otherwise, again, thanks, Emily. It was great work.
Thank you. Commissioner Jimmy?
Just curious regarding the 50 to 100-foot setback and the historical objections to the shorter distance. What tended to be the majority of the objections? Just looking at these other provisions we have, for instance, adequate screening, safety fence around the perimeter. Is it just sound? If there is already going to be a visual screen?
Yeah, I think it's sound and any nuisance that might happen with this type of use. I can tell you the Planning Commission back in 2011 was kind of, I think, where the Planning Commission is thinking today to allow that kind of a use in a commercial district. Their thinking at that time was it was the residential use that we just added as a conditionally permitted use in this commercial area that it's the residence that's the new use, not an outdoor dining, which is permitted on the ground.
Sure. I guess, just my one concern, and perhaps a 50-foot setback doesn't address it, but, to establish businesses there that are referenced, might lose competitive edge to other ones that could then do that farther away. Just 50 feet seems a little arbitrary in different circumstances, so I'm sure lots of people would disagree, but just wanted to understand a little history because I'd be more interested in the shorter setback personally. So,
Commissioner Hamilton?
I think this is relevant. I hope that everybody understands that this isn't, somebody can't decide that owns a building and say, oh, I think we'll have dining on the roof. It's a major, major change. A minimum $100,000 investment in elevators to get handicapped access to the roof. Fire stairs, at least 2, to get people off the roof. Adequate access for those fire stairs once they get to ground to get to safe release from the property. It's a major issue. This isn't a fly-by-night operation that we're just going to try and sell some beer here and see if we can't make a profit. It's a thoughtful, planful effort. And it requires all the building permits and all the permissions that any other new facility would require. Now, this is just one more addition to those requirements.
Commissioner Nemeroff?
One thing I was thinking about these setbacks, and right at this point, I think the reasoning that Carrie gave for 100 feet makes sense. So I like the fact that generally this will allow rooftop dining through the city of Edina. That's something we don't have today. The other thing I would suggest, though, is we're going to be doing. Let me back up one sentence. The reason I think, Carrie, that you chose this setback has to do with the historical issues arising in the 50th and France area. And so within a few months, we're going to be doing a small area plan for 50th and France, and it can be a topic discussed at that time. I would suggest go forward with the plan as suggested by Carrie, and I think I'd recommend including the parking issue, and then discuss the setback issue as part of this 50th and France small area plan. And if that small area plan, they come back and say, hey, no, make it 10 feet. We don't care. We can revisit this. I see the hand up on.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is supposed to be a public hearing. So before we get too into the pros and cons, I might suggest that we open up the public part, hear the comments, and then start the debate.
I just want to continue with the questions with Carrie at this point. So any other questions for Carrie?
I guess my last one. So, for instance, those two businesses you referenced, if it were 50 feet, or is it okay there, or is that still within 50 feet?
It would be okay for Salute, but not Edina Grill.
Just because it's right there.
Yep.
Okay. And just one other consideration as we talk and look to the future with a lot of this stuff is, we're hoping to see more residential in the mix of all these commercial areas. So, that 100 feet it might seem like a lot, but it might end up being a hindrance going forward. Just a thought.
Commissioner Berube.
Quick question. Given the weather we have here, what would be the thought on extending that rooftop season with heaters and canopies? And if we're silent, does that mean it's not allowed, or it means it is allowed?
That would be allowed.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So this would not just be a summer thing. It would.
Right.
be as long
And
as
if
we-
they fully enclosed it, it becomes a structure and it's permitted.
Okay.
Okay, so my final question, just so everyone understands, so this is a conditional use permit. And so with that, we're setting some of these conditions. But you're also saying that those conditions, that whoever the applicant is, they could also request a variance to all of those conditions, correct?
They could, all or one, or, right, and that would be subject to your
Discretion.
review. Yep, correct.
Got it. Okay, great. Any other questions for Carrie? Great, thank you. Great. So this is a public hearing. We'd like to open up the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak on this? And again, just if you could state your name and address, all that good stuff. Thank you. And you get 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioners. Mr. Teague. My name is Joel Hilgendorf. I'm here on behalf of the Edina Chamber of Commerce. I'm the current chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also the chair of the Chamber's Economic Development Committee. I have with me tonight a number of representatives of the Chamber and the Chamber's Economic Development Committee. The Chamber actually submitted a written resolution in support of the ordinance that has been drafted to this point to Mr. Teague. I'm not going to read that, but I just want to reiterate to the Commission that the Chamber's Economic Development Committee has reviewed the proposed ordinance and finds that the parameters within it are both reasonable and practical, and it's both reasonable and practical for business owners to comply with those parameters. And probably more importantly, we find that allowing rooftop dining is good for Edina and for the business community and for the economic vitality of the community. And so therefore, after reviewing it, the chamber has determined that we support approving the ordinance as drafted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, Commissioner?
Before you go, I'm just curious, did in your discussions, did you guys discuss the setback and what might be appropriate, what might not be appropriate?
Well, the 100-foot setback we found was appropriate, but that does not mean that we're not willing to review any modifications of that. We did not feel that, I don't want to say that we didn't think that a different setback would be inappropriate. So we're certainly open to reviewing any modification of the ordinance and making another recommendation to the commission.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, is anybody else from the public who'd like to speak on this? Okay, hearing none. Oh.
Hi, Scott Ferguson, 18185 Hummingbird Road in Deep Haven, Minnesota. I'm a development manager for Lifetime Fitness, and I checked out the ordinance, and the one comment I'd like to make is on the noise and the audibleness next to the adjacent property. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, you know, what's the, you know, you have a zero lot line situation or something like that, or like at 50th and France, and, you know, Salutes here, and then, you know, the next parcel is a centimeter away. So, like, you know, I'm just kind of trying to figure out how that works, you know. And I get the nuisance part, you know, and there are nuisance laws and requirements, but just thought I'd put that out for discussion.
Sure, thank you. I think when we're done with that, we can, once we close the public hearing, we can adjust that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Anyone? Okay.
I move to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Public hearing is closed. Okay, now I'll bring it back up to the Planning Commission, and now is our time when we can go into more discussion on the ordinance itself. Before we get there, Carrie, is that, do you want to define a little bit more about the amplified sound? Speakers may not be audible to adjacent property.
Yeah, so as written, the ordinance would not allow the sound to go beyond the lot line from a speaker. The alternative that I would suggest, if you want to allow a little more, would be to reference the city's existing noise ordinance, where it's at certain decibel levels, day versus night. I believe it's 50 decibels at night, 60 during the day. So we could just add a reference to that provision of the code. We've got a really good decibel meter reader that we could monitor that pretty easily as staff.
And what was that code again? It's the noise ordinance, did you say?
Yes, yeah, I would add the specific citation into the ordinance to reference that section of the code.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Thorson.
Would that mean you would recommend striking section 4, which is the amplified sound? Would not be striking that prohibition? That's number 4.
I believe it's letter 3C.
You would recommend striking that if we were to include the sound ordinance?
Yes, yep. I would replace it with that language that references the noise ordinance.
Any other comments or discussion? Sure, go for it.
It's like, are there any restrictions on noises besides like those produced by like speakers, like maybe like dialogue or like general conversation.
Yeah, so that would apply, the nuisance ordinance and that meter reading would apply, yep. But having that specific reference in the ordinance makes that clear to anyone coming through.
Carrie, I forget if you mentioned, was that noise ordinance particular to the commercial district uses, or is that just a general thing from?
Yeah, it's the general nuisance noise ordinance.
Okay. I just know if people talk, and I mean, a bunch of people talking pretty loudly could get beyond that, I would imagine.
It can. It has to be at a sustained level over a long period of time at that specific reading. So if it goes up and down.
Not like everyone's going to be carousing, but, you know, tends to happen at a rooftop bar.
Right, but speakers, you know, if it's music, that is going to be a constant.
Sure.
Any other comments? Do you want to repeat some of your comments before?
Well, sure, yeah, I like this proposal, Carrie. I like your suggestion of replacing the 3C with the noise ordinance, because then it just deals with the sound regardless of cause or source. I do recommend adding the parking. I see City of Minneapolis does not have a parking requirement, but I think it's a little different culture there in terms of what's considered acceptable, where people can park. And I think in Edina, I think if we did not have sufficient parking for certain sized places, I think we would end up having some neighborhood pushback. We can always waive that for places that are, say, at Southdale, you know, because we've waived other establishments. But I think for things that closer you get to neighborhood, I think it's good to have a parking requirement. Just repeat my comment earlier. I think the setback you have now is a good way to do it now. I do think that we can also have this discussion during the 50th and France Small Area Plan and get the neighborhood feedback. So thanks for your work on this. Thanks for your staff's work.
Commissioner Hobbs.
I guess my only comment is I'm a little concerned about the setback part. I mean, really kind of any number. You know, the issues are sight and sound, it seems like. And part of what makes an area vibrant is that there's this mix of residence and commercial. And that's what we're going to want to promote in the future. So almost whatever distance we pick, we're kind of picking weird winners and losers. And as long as there's adequate screening from the site standpoint, and as long as we're addressing from a sound standpoint, you know, using the sound, the nuisance ordinance or whatever we use, it seems like we're mitigating any of the impacts nearby, and we don't have to rely on kind of this arbitrary number of distance. So I guess I would think about not really having a distance thing, but making sure that we're good on the two issues that matter, sight and sound. And even from a sound standpoint, you know, part of the screening can be also screening that helps to mitigate the sound that's leaving wherever it is. So that would be the responsibility established to make sure that you're staying within whatever decibel level we pick that's adequate not to impact the neighbors.
I agree. I know I've discussed this with Carrie, and I brought it up at the last time we looked at this, that we're promoting mixed use, and so having that distance, you know, if you have a mixed use building with housing and within it, you know, right there. So I think that we're setting ourselves up for variances a lot, you know, and so I say that we strike that. And again, we can address all those other issues that we're trying to address with that setback. So that would be my recommendation, that we remove that setback. Any other comments? And Commissioner Lee?
Are you questioning is it the 50 feet? People have said 100 feet.
50, 100, any. You know, if you have residential within that building, you know, within 20 feet, you can't.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, I think that I do think that by having some number in there, and again, someone can always come before us and ask for a variance, and we can still review it case by case. But this at least gives some guideline and some protection, I think, to the residential areas. To have nothing in there and stay silent on it, I think is a little a little bit worrisome for me. I think the 50 feet has probably has some standing based on what other communities have done. So to me, it makes a lot of sense.
Commissioner Nemiroff.
Steve, Joanna, I agree with everything you said, except the reason why I think the setback's good, I just want to reiterate, at this time for this project is taking into account the history of the citizenry, discussions on it, and the very soon opportunity we have to discuss that issue with the concerned citizens. If we had never received any negative feedback, I wouldn't be thinking about this. If we didn't have the opportunity within a few months to actually talk to those people and get their feedback, I wouldn't be as keyed on the setback. I also agree with Sue about, there's always a variance. So, yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said, but I think in this particular situation, I think the setback is fine, and then we'd be able to adjust it soon if we get different feedback from the neighbors that were unhappy in 2011.
Commissioner Bennett.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate some comments too. Even for the opportunity for the businesses that are there too, that I mentioned, it can be an arbitrary distance that limits some of their use. And I agree, if we're taking care of sight and sound, that's really what that setback is for. I imagine it's prescribing a number to hopefully limit those two things. And the fact that there are no residents here tonight in objection to this, and maybe it's just not widespread or known, maybe that's also testament to the change of the tide over in that area. So I guess we do have an opportunity in a few months or whenever to address it. So either table it till then, or I recommend striking it fully, just for our push to have more mixed use in these areas.
Commissioner Berube.
I would strike the setback as well. I think what we're looking for is vibrancy. We're addressing the sound or potential sound, and the site. And, maybe more important, nothing's going to happen after 10 o'clock. So it's not like we're talking about uptown or the U or downtown. Nothing will be on the rooftop after 10 o'clock.
Technically, they could request a variance to that, but, we'll address it.
But then we can address it.
Any other comments or motions or?
May I make a motion?
Yes, you may.
I move approval of the ordinance amendments as detailed in the staff memo with 2 changes. First off, under section 1, subsection 3A, striking completely the variance or the setback requirement. Under section C, replacing the amplified audible sound will conform with the existing city noise ordinances.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there a friendly?
So can I offer the friendly amendment to add the parking on, or would you rather not? Can I make a motion to add the parking to amend then? Accessing Robert's Rules of Order, I'll make a motion to amend it then if it won't be a friendly amendment.
Okay, is that amendment accepted? No, okay. Okay, all right.
So yes for a second.
Yep, right. Is there a second to that? So you're going back.
To the original motion. Second.
Right. I'm sorry, what?
Is that what you're asking?
No.
No. Sorry, I missed the step.
So.
You're asking for a second?
Yeah, it's for the parking.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that doesn't pass. All right. So we've got the motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
So 2 nays. Okay. Got it. Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is community comment, and this is where we open it up for anyone from the community who would like to bring subject to our attention? Nope. So hearing none for those, we'll move on. So under reports and recommendations, we've got a sketch plan review at 5146 Eden Avenue, the former public works site. Carrie.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. I'm going to skip over. I see I've got a wrong address on there. Oh, in fact, I don't have the right presentation. Okay. What happened? Wow. Well, I don't know what has happened to my...
Did you have it open on your computer?
It is, but I open it as a read-only. Sure. What's next on the agenda? Is there something we can...
Yeah, it's the comp plan update, so.
Or you could talk about adding a member, and I can go and
Why
try
don't we
to find...
do that? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so we're going to move to 8C, and that's discussing the Greater Southdale Area Work Group, adding a Planning Commission member to the work group to replace Steve Hobbs. So we had discussed this a while ago, and I think that Commissioner Nemerov had offered to take that place. And then the last 2 weeks ago, I can't even talk, last Planning Commission meeting, I think we wanted to wait to hear with everybody here, but anyway, if Commissioner Nemerov wants to be on here, I support that, but is there other discussion of who should be on?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that because you were both gone, I just wanted to hold the vote until you were here, so just in case either of you were interested in that position. That was the only reason. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm intrigued. It seems like it's a great committee that works together really well, and you're doing really important things. Schedule-wise, it would be tough for me because I know you guys meet frequently. But thank you for bringing that up. I don't know, Jimmy.
Yeah, same for me. Just pretty tapped out with everything right now, and I know I couldn't lead a great effort at this point.
Great. So I think that can we make a motion on that? I think we agreed last time that we should make a formal motion. So is there a motion?
Yeah.
Anyone? I guess, can I make a motion? Or do we have to make? We're talking about.
Yeah, I'll motion. I motion
Thank you.
Commissioner Hobbs to not move.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I would recommend that Commissioner Nemerov replace Steve Hobbs, Commissioner Hobbs, on the Southdale Area Work Group.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Welcome aboard.
I'm in it now.
You're in it for good. Tomorrow night. Do you?
Nope.
Are you good?
It better be here now. There it is, right address and everything. Sorry about that. So before you is a sketch plan review. where again you're asked to make non-binding comments on a potential future redevelopment proposal. So this site is located in the Grandview area. It's the old Public Works site, about a little over 3 acres in size, 3.3 acres. So as Economic Development Manager Neuendorf came to the Planning Commission a couple of weeks ago and laid out the background on this site. Just quickly, December 17th, the HRA entered into an agreement with Frauenschuh to develop the site. The plan proposes a lot of the uses that were talked about in the Grandview Development Framework Vision document. That includes district parking, affordable housing, multifamily housing, community building, public open space, enhancement of the public realm. So it is consistent with those uses that we talked about in that framework document. So the site is vacant today. It's currently zoned industrial, planned industrial district, as with the old Public Works. Same with the bus garage, was previously zoned industrial. The bus garage to the west was rezoned to PUD, and that housing project is under construction now. So what the applicant is proposing here is to construct a 17-story, 157-unit apartment with underground parking. There would be 3-story, 27, what they're calling artist lofts. That would be the affordable housing component within the project. A 20 to 30,000 square foot art center and active adult center. Another term for the senior center potentially could move into this space. There would be district parking. It's all within that hill that you see on the screen, so hidden. Somewhat similar to the 17-story building that we reviewed on Hazelton, with the parking essentially hidden from the street, with green space on top of it. Another angle of the site itself. So all the parking is underneath here. There would be 430 stalls roughly for district parking. You can see this connection, pedestrian connection up to the park space above the parking structure, residential tower. There would be pedestrian connections through and underneath the building into the open space. There would be another pedestrian connection across a bridge here, across the railroad tracks that would connect to the top of the Jerry's parking ramp. Again, you see the public community space to the south and pedestrian activity on the street as well. Another view from the top. I'll let the applicant go into the detail and describe the building itself. So another view. So what's required here is a comprehensive plan amendment to increase height from 6 stories and 72 feet to 17 stories and 193 feet. In terms of density, this is consistent with allowed density, which is up to 100 units an acre in this site, so we're consistent with the comp plan in that regard. The rezoning would be proposed from Planned Industrial District to PUD. The flexibility that would be requested through the PUD, they need some relief on setbacks for the tower. Again, our setbacks are based on the height of the building. So a building of this height could not fit under current zoning. And also flexibility in terms of number of parking spaces. So in return, that flexibility, they would be providing high quality building, that additional public space, the district parking, that public community building, provision of affordable housing, and a pedestrian oriented design. So with that, I will stop there, answer any questions that you may have, and the development team is here to make a presentation as well.
Thank you, Carrie. Maybe before we go for questions, if you could just again, for the audience, to explain the sketch plan process and whether or not there's public comment, or kind of run through that, or what's allowed during sketch plan.
Yeah, no public comment, no public testimony is taken at sketch plan. This is your opportunity to provide the potential development or potential developer of this property with feedback prior to any formal application. Should a formal application move forward, there would be 2 public hearings, one at the Planning Commission and one at the City Council. So there is opportunity to provide feedback. There were a couple of open houses where the development team was there, including city staff. Mr. Neuendorf attended those meetings, and he'll be indicating a summary of kind of what took place at those open houses. One of them was just this evening prior to this meeting, so it will be fresh.
So he will be presenting that after?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Commissioner Teague, yeah, the shot on the screen is fine. The on the lower, the glass where it's called Edina Arts Center, that building's entirely would be for public use?
Correct.
And you talked about the Arts Center, which is an existing facility, which would, right. This would recreate the one that's at Lake Cornelia. Correct. And then what other component is that of that public space?
Potentially the existing senior center could move into kind of a repurposed space. So it'll be the combination of those 2 uses.
And that senior center currently is where the library site is that?
Correct.
And the library would absorb that function, or this would just be an additional?
To be determined what the city would do with that space.
But as we're looking at it, it's 3 or 4 stories. That's an all public use?
Correct.
With public plazas and accessibility, okay.
Correct. Yeah, the 3rd story of this building, and the architect will go into more detail, but this accesses directly onto that park space.
And you see that area there, that's kind of like a plaza where the kind of a canopy.
In the front here?
To a little bit to the right there, yes.
Yep.
Kind of a gathering space.
Correct.
Very nice. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Thorson.
How is this guided again in the comprehensive plan?
It's guided for mixed use.
Okay.
So the uses and the density that's contemplated here is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's just the height.
Okay.
Are there any of the setback or the variances that are proposed that just staff has different recommendations for, or something that comes to mind, or different opportunities they saw?
Yeah, the area of concern is how tight the row houses are to Arcadia. Part of that comes from, so there's a 10-foot easement along the railroad tracks. We're not exactly sure if that can be used for construction. If that area can be accessed, the whole building could shift over 10 feet. So we would hope to answer that question before they make a formal application. So that was really the only area that felt pretty tight to the street.
Commissioner Lee.
Let's see. Carrie, is there any reason that Edina Art Center in some ways couldn't just be a community center? By the rendering, it appears to be all, the functions are all art related, but in fact that really hasn't been determined, has it? Or has it?
Well, ultimately it's a decision of the city council.
Right.
What that public space is to be, but for now the thinking is these two uses, the art center and potentially that moving the senior center over.
So can you explain a little bit about what the senior center program includes, entails? So what types of spaces are we talking about? Are they meeting rooms or what? Performing arts? What?
Yep,
stage?
there's a series of, a lot of that isn't fully formulated yet.
Classrooms?
Potentially.
Could you have anything that has to do with wellness or?
It certainly
I see
could.
some heads nodding. Okay, I might save that then for the applicant. The housing, is that how's that being described right now? Is it rental?
It would be rental, correct.
So is it market rate luxury, or have we defined that?
Most
luxury?
likely market rate luxury. Yes.
What's the city's sense about oversaturation in that we seem to have a lot of rental luxury? So the city's stance is still room.
Yeah, it's a little different. Maybe how much this competes with, say, the Market Street project. I wouldn't see this necessarily as competing too much with the Southdale area. You have really good access to the freeways here, really good access to the bus routes in this location. So it's a good location for higher density residential.
And what's your understanding of the artist loft? So what's that concept, or what does that entail?
Well, that's the affordable housing piece, so that they would have to be qualified. Part of the thinking would be, in terming it artist lofts, is taking advantage of the art center where they could live close by and do some work there.
And are they the townhome units there, or is it?
Yes, so it would be this entire structure here.
Okay, so that part is the artist lofts. And artist lofts usually mean that they have to have they have to sign a statement saying that they are involved in a business relating to art, that they make something, some kind of art.
I think that's still to be determined. The main thing there is that's affordable housing. So anybody that lives there has to qualify, meet those income guidelines for affordable housing.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Hamilton.
I'm sure the city's thought about the art center there for a long time, but I've always thought of the art center as a real playing card to attract a development to a place. This seems to fill a hole in a development instead of create the development. If it were integrated into the tower, if it were next to Southdale, if it were in the center of a higher density population, it seems like it would be a more valuable playing card in development in that case than it might be here, unless there's a reason other than we have the land that the art center wants to be in this spot. Does it?
Well, I know that's something that the Arts Commission, and I believe yes, we have the chair to that committee, so maybe he can speak to how the commission has looked at specific locations. I know they have zeroed in on this spot.
Because it is the back door to that retail strip. It is hidden. What Edina seems to find a way to do is take all of its gems and hide them so that no one can find them. And we've done it yet again. Here's the art center that everybody, that it's a new building. It could be marvelous. It could be a real mecca for all sorts of folks. And it's at the back door to Jerry's.
Question. Commissioner Bennett?
Does this development in its current form satisfy our affordable housing?
Yeah, it would. In running the numbers, I believe I mentioned 9%. Depends on the specific areas of the apartment that we calculate, because it's 10% of the total floor area. Like, the short answer is I believe it does meet the 10%. Rerunning the numbers, my first shot at it, I didn't think it did. So that's something that will be fleshed out clear as part of a formal application. Their intent is to meet the 10%.
Commissioner Nevrov?
Yeah, Carrie, in lines with the affordable housing, I think we've had developments come through here before where they haven't put in affordable housing, that they made a contribution to future affordable housing. Will those contributions be applied to this development, or is that something going to happen somewhere else?
In this proposal, they're proposing to put it in the development. So that's these townhomes here. So they would be satisfying our affordable housing policy within this development. They wouldn't be located in the tower, but on this site.
Right. But is money that was contributed by previous developments, will that be applied to this development?
I can't say for certainty that won't happen. I haven't heard that discussed yet.
Okay, because we got like these in lieu, if you remember. Okay, all right, thanks, Gary.
All right, I got a couple. So for the overall property, who is going to own it, even under the art center and stuff? Is it all going to be privately owned, or what's the situation there?
I think part of that is still to be determined. I think what the Planning Commission has asked is to look more specifically at the uses and the land use, not so much of the detail. Perhaps Mr. Neuendorf could address questions like that.
Okay.
But I don't
So
know
if it's under separate ownership, does it have to be platted into separate lots?
It's rental, it could all sit on the same property.
So the, okay, art center, all of that could be.
It could,
under
or
one.
it could be divided also. I think some of those things are still to be determined.
Okay.
In Edina, we allow multiple uses on one lot, so it's really, it could go either way.
Okay. And I know you kind of referenced this briefly, but so what's being proposed tonight in the sketch plan clearly meets the Grandview District Development Framework and the Grandview District Transportation Study, all of those recommendations? And
Well,
we have,
it's difficult to say it clearly meets. It's a framework, it's a guide, but it meets a lot of the principles and things that are talked about in those documents, yes.
all right, but the transportation study, were there not specific recommendations, or was that all just guidelines too, the transportation study?
In terms of the roadway network, is there I'm not sure.
I guess I just want to make sure that what's being proposed is meeting,
Yeah, so this wouldn't interfere with that east-west future, whether
Right.
it be a pedestrian walkway or a streetway. This wouldn't interfere in that. That still could be constructed.
Okay.
They're proposing to put the pedestrian connection across to the Jerry's ramp. Next to it in the future still could be that east-west roadway. I believe that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Commissioner Nevrov.
Carrie, maybe we want to hear, I don't know, is there going to be another presentation about the
Yes.
property itself?
Yeah, more detail about the.
So I guess I'd ask you this, but maybe, I could ask you after, but it sounds like there've been a few public meetings. Is there a summary of the feedback that's been received?
That's what Mr. Neuendorf will address.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Yes, Mr. Neuendorf will address that as part
Okay.
of the team presentation about those neighborhood meetings that were held. One of them was held just this evening before this meeting.
Okay, so whoever from staff is next. Is it? Oh, okay. So, wait, I'm sorry. When do we hear?
As part of, as we are the property owner, Mr. Neuendorf will speak at the end here.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm a little confused who's welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Olson, Planning Commissioners. Good evening. I'm Dave Anderson with Frauenschuh Incorporated, 7101 West 78th Street, and we're the developer. We've been working with HRA staff, city staff, over the really the last many weeks, a couple months, leading up to tonight's presentation. So having been through this before, sketch plan review, as was stated, we're here tonight to share a concept, share plans that have came together through discussions about the mix of uses. These uses have been defined by the HRA, really, in the framework of the types of uses that are coming together and being integrated on the site in this plan. So tonight we're going to have our team walk you through that. I think a number of the questions that were being asked are going to be clarified a bit by the presentation, and then we're certainly ready to answer some additional questions and get into some discussion on specifics. We'd be happy to do that. So tonight we have our team. My colleague Dean Williamson's here with Frauenschuh. Dean DeVolis with DGR and his colleagues are here on the architecture and master planning, as well as Terry Manerick, our landscape architect and designer. So we've got our kind of gamut here and ready to walk you through things and hopefully have some discussion here that we very much look forward to. So thank you again, and we'll have Dean step up in a moment. Thanks.
Good evening, Dean DeVolis. and I gave you a quick walkthrough. Our presentation really consists of 3 parts. I'll go through the building, Troy will walk through the civic space, and then Bill will back clean up and go through the community meetings, which we had 2 of. One the night of the blizzard, and about 30 people showed up. And then one tonight, which I'd say is about 50 were present. 100, okay, that was good. So we've had a pretty good, we've had a good showing, I should say, in discussion on this, on the open house. So what I'm gonna do is walk through the project and give some quick background on it. And I'm really gonna start with these 7 principles just to review, like, why is it shaped the way it is? Why did this come out in the form that you're looking at? It really goes back to these 7 principles, which I think Bill may describe. I'm just gonna touch on these briefly because this has really guided the development, which is leverage of publicly owned parcels and create a vibrant, connected district that serves as a catalyst, enhance the district's viability as a neighborhood center with regional connections, turn perceived barriers into opportunities, consider layering development over supporting infrastructure, taking advantage of natural topography of the site, design for the present and the future by presenting large movements using key parcels as stepping stone, organize parking as effective resource in the district, improve movement within the district, to help people all ages can be facilitated and create identity and a unique sense of place that incorporates natural spaces and the high quality. These were the guidelines that sort of set this and gave it the shape that you see present. And again, as was mentioned, the major components that Carrie talked about, the civic building, which the arts center, the outdoor civic space, the district parking, the bicycle, the restaurant, those components. And I'll walk through those components as we go through. So let me just jump into the project. So I described, the project really consists of the major component of the apartment and or ownership housing that has not been decided. So it could be either ownership and or apartments. Just want to clarify that that's still being evaluated. So that's all open. The affordable townhouses, that's it over here. Loft units in the Arts Center and Adult Activity Center, which is being formulated. And Michael's here that can discuss the location. So if we need to answer that, that could be part of it. This is a location they thought really served. And in terms of visibility, I'll go to the site. Yes, today it is the back end of Jerry's. But actually, this is the end. And there's a reason why certain things were placed. This front and actually opposite of Our Lady Grace actually is a good gateway and a very highly visible portion of the site. If the Arts Center was back in this corner, much more difficult. And there's a reason why the tower was here versus here, by putting the public facilities really at the front door of the site, which is Arcadia and Eden, versus this area, which is actually backed up against the Starbucks drive-through. So there's sort of logic why these elements were placed and organized on it. And a reason for the building design in terms of where it's located, the idea is put the height and density here, which is about 150 units, to allow for the open space and allow for this major public component to the site. Because I know you just approved like the Trammco development, the seniors here, which is more of a horizontal development about the same size. That didn't allow any open space because it's all a 6-story building. So the idea is to opt to go taller, which then allows this open civic aspect to really tie in the site and really give it a sense of place, which goes back to those principles that I just discussed. And so that was the logic of it. And put this at probably the worst part of the site, but use height to overcome the disadvantage of, as Commissioner Hamilton's guy in the back end of Jerry's and that, because this end is really that area. The south end is a lot more engaging because it opens up into the Our Lady Grace area. So that's a basic development. And the major components you can see right here with the apartment tower, the artist lofts, the connection through, and the idea of this major amenity space, which Terry will describe more in detail, so I'm not going to go long into that. But in terms of the connection, which you can see here, this east-west connection, which is proposed, depending on whatever happens with the Grandview Green Lit project, we've built this piece of it, where it says Arrival Plaza. We've made a connection, and I'll show you that ties in the back of Jerry. So we're starting to build a first link of the east-west connection. It will eventually tie potentially over Highway 100 to City Hall and build on. This piece is the beginning of that infrastructure, which could become a road, but today we're considering it as a pedestrian bicycle to get it started. And as things evolve, they can develop off of that and come into that aspect of it. So the key parts of this, in just sort of a simple diagram, and as Carrie mentioned, public access at all the major corners, the housing tower, the civic green space, the civic facility, the affordable housing is the basic idea, and then this green connection that ties all the way through the site. So that people have pedestrian enter at grade, from these points, tie off at Jerry's, enter from this side of Lady of Grace, and have this kind of connection that creates a space that really this side of Edina lacks. There is no civic space. You have the Centennial Lakes that really addresses the Southdale area, but in terms of this area, the Grandview District, you know, there's a formal industrial commercial area that grew up along railroad track and along what used to be Highway 69. What starts to give this area a sense of place, give it a catalyst, give it an element that starts the reason to be here? And this is really the key piece that sets that up. Transportation network, this represents a pedestrian bicycle connection. It goes to Jerry, which ties right into the back door and can continue on. So the idea is we're going to build a bridge over the railroad tracks to make that connection. And then the aspects of cars that can come right off of 500 right into the building here, into the building here. And then the connection through the site. So the idea is make the site very porous from all directions, so it has this high accessibility and civic component to it. And again, here's the major components of it: the apartment tower, the housing, the civic green, the adult activity center, and arts center that are the major part. And then below all this is obviously the district parking structure, which serves it, and also park and ride. I'll get into that a little bit. So here's the basic setup. This upper garage here is the private portion that sits below the apartment tower. So that's the private parking, 3 levels of it, and that helps fill that hill, because remember the site was a gravel pit. It was mined out. So the idea that we're stacking all the density in order to support 3 levels of parking, you need a substantial structure above, because parking costs $25,000 a stall. So that really helps justify it and tuck all of that in here. This part is a public parking. The proposal at the lower level of this can also serve as a park and ride. We know in this area there's approximately 100 cars that park within the Jerry's parking lot that serves it. So now we want to create a structure that allows it to occur, and then use the lobby of the Arts Center as a waiting area and plaza, so that commuters can wait here. A bus stop's proposed here, so it's the idea to park, stay warm, hop on the bus, experience some art, and make that connection going through the site. Next level up is, again, just the parking expressed on the second level as you work up the hill. The beginning of the artist townhouse is here. And then the second level, the Arts Center adult activity. And then finally, the top level, again, more parking. Second level here, the beginning of this green hill. And then finally, the top, which is the civic level with commercial flex space at the bottom of the tower, restaurant, so forth. A menu that supports the green, the townhouses, and the Arts Center. So the idea is that this is stacked up, and it really serves a lot of functions in terms of commuter, civic space, park and ride, and those aspects. And then the tower component goes there. Tower is split into 15 and 70 stories to scale and provide a sky lobby, sky amenity up on top. Here's the section and sort of the issues that deal with the site. This is basically the grade, this dotted line. So the idea is that we stack this element at the end, which is the deepest part of the site, which basically sits 30 feet into the ground, into the slope. And then the community parking function over here, and then finally the Arts Center, adult activity center at this end of the site, which is really the south end, the more prominent. The idea of putting the building here allows this whole civic space, plaza, to have south orientation, and in using the building, and Terry will get into a wall here that really creates a seasonal space that'll have weather protection, solar orientation, really aspect to have a high degree of uses through the year. So now this basically shows why it's set up, so you can see where the parking is by this gray area in here. These are the artist townhouses, the Arts Center, and how we're using that grade to shape the site. And there's this end, this is a posterior of Jerry's and so forth, but by starting to create this element here, starts to give this area a function and purpose, which overcomes its disadvantages. The green helps in there, and this has a much more prominent location on the south side of the site in terms of the high visibility of that portion of it. Again, this is a view looking at it towards the southwest. This is a future pedestrian connection to Jerry's. The apartment tower here, the Arts Center back this way, and sort of the development of Arcadia. So the idea with this is to activate the three streets. The future street, which is an east-west connection, I'll call it. Arcadia with the Artist Townhouse and Plaza, and then finally Eden Avenue with the Arts Center and its connection green space. The idea is that all the edges are active, and then the various connections to site from here, and from here. So the site really gets networked within the deal. And this sort of shows the approach from the southeast. Again, the connection, the Arts Center, and then the parking's below this. But the idea is you're taking these peripheral streets and getting life expressed to them, and then making these very visible connections into the civic green, which sits within the site, and that purpose. Again, these are just what we call white model quick vignettes, just showing the various views of the site from the Arts Center. The idea of this building being lifted up so you have a clear view into the park. So the base of the building is less than the tower, so you have this clear visibility in this connection into the project. Again, just showing how this connection works to the green. So the idea that we always keep these connections very visible, the idea how you approach it off 100 into the project there. And then this probably is a good diagram to sort of show what it's describing is these connections, the civic green, the artist's affordable housing component, the connection down to the Eden Arcade Avenue, the adult education, how that works, working off the green this way. So the idea is that there's amphitheater here, connections of this, and then the plaza at the south end, so that the buildings are integrated, revolving around the central space. And quick thing on civil is this is set up as a heat sink. A water sink. What's nice about this site, because there's no exposed parking, the rainwater, stormwater can be used in recirculating, because the problem with lots is oils and salt, which make the water a throwaway. Because we have everything covered, we can use all the stormwater in this to irrigate the site, replenish the site, and work there. We have a storm trap here for overflow, but the beauty of this layout is it has a much better environmental, because we've screened the parking areas and prevented the fresh water from getting contaminated with what I call street water, which has those elements. So it has nicely, and then this big lawn absorbs stormwater, which creates a water sink in there, slows the stormwater, provides a filtration, so it really has a nice environmental system on what's really a very dense urban area in Edina with all the development, historic development around it. And so now Terry will walk through the landscape aspect and sort of the basis of how this civic park is programmed. Terry?
Hi, Terry Menard, Confluence Landscape Architecture. We're very excited to be a part of this project. It's interesting, we worked on the actual Parks, Recreation, and Trail System Master Plan for the City of Edina, and as part of that system, there was a real gap in the park system within this area of Edina. The Grandview District never really offered a public place, an open space. There is a Tupa Park, but it's kind of hard to get to and inaccessible because of Highway 100. There's that gap that goes across. I know the lid is an idea, but I think this project is one of the first projects within the metro that actually takes a look at a parking structure and creates a public space. Dean talked about the porosity of the site and how you can access it from both the upper levels and the lower levels. The nice thing about this is it becomes a city civic space. It has a lot of opportunities for programming. It not only benefits the people in the tower, but the artist lofts, but also the senior center and the arts facility as well, for programming, different activities, different types of festivals and events. And it makes this community a more walkable, more pedestrian-based system within the heart of an area that's kind of primarily dependent upon vehicular movement right now. When we looked at the connectivity from the south, one of the ideas we had was how do we get people up there without putting them in a building and taking them up a tower? So we took a look at the side of this space as we have entries for a vehicular drop-off that do occur at the base of the Art Center Senior Center facility and the base of the parking structure, and then covered that with a grassed, landscaped area with trees, plantings, and then in the center area developing kind of a rest stop, knowing that it is a high elevation change or a big grade change, creating a plaza space that comes actually off the second floor of the Art Center and creates an amphitheater, performance space, could be a place for demonstration art, programming that could happen within the building as well. And then as we get to the top, we also have that area that is considered kind of a courtyard commons to the top side of the Art Center Senior Center that can be used as a private courtyard, but also creates a really good transition as we move from that public facility into the open lawn, which could be a more active public space, creating a nice sense of privacy between the two spaces. The perimeter of the site, I know this question was brought up about the streets and how we're going to follow the transportation systems plan. We are following that, and these two sections show the two preferred sections that were identified in that plan, one for Eden and one for Arcadia. We're going to follow those. I know Carrie mentioned the idea of the tightness along Arcadia. We hope to address that, and we will address that to accommodate this exact section in our development. We really think it's critical to begin that separation of pedestrian and bicycle movement from vehicular traffic, especially with the type of activity as this area develops and continues to develop. The traffic will increase and the movement will increase, and the more we can enhance that pedestrian environment, the more likely it is to become more of a pedestrian-oriented environment as it keeps developing. But our intent here is to capture rainwater, stormwater, as Dean was saying, use it in a lot of the planted areas, create those buffers between pedestrian and vehicular movement, and create more of a landscaped park type setting as opposed to a harsh street conditioned environment. And then of course to the north, that block would be continued as that Woonurf type street feel. It has access that is provided from that area to the top of the parking structure amenity space. So we do have the opportunity for park service vehicles to be able to access that way. We have the opportunity for event trucks to be able to access there, food trucks and all kinds of things that can access off that Woonurf type street condition. When we began to look at that amenity platform, we thought about all the different programming opportunities and ideas that could happen in it. For a scale or sense of scale, it's about the size of a football field. So it's a very large space. It's kind of hard to see in this context and scale, but it does provide a lot of opportunity. We created a kind of a circular looped walking area on the outside of that, could be used for running or walking, small child cycling, a variety of different opportunities. We've created buffers in between the actual artist loft, or the artist lofts, the seniors and art center, as well as the railway buffer with more native traditional plantings with birches and evergreens, kind of providing those buffers between the active public space and the more private spaces. We took a look at some quick programming ideas. You can kind of see as I go through these, a typical day where people could gather on the lawn, have picnics, play catch with a Frisbee, just sit down. The opportunity to maybe do an event, like you could do a half court or full court basketball event there. You could do a tennis or pickleball type of event. You could also begin to provide small child soccer or flag football within this area. We wouldn't want to get a little too large because we'd have those balls obviously flying all over the place, but at that scale it would work. Small concerts or performances could happen. Festivals such as summer type festivals or art fairs or markets could happen within this space as well. And then also maybe a local regional winter market could be a nice attraction or feature here as well. These are just some of the ideas showing what we're talking about, with just general gathering spaces to the idea of food trucks and creating opportunities for a variety of different events. The bottom picture on your bottom right kind of shows this idea of projecting movies and stuff on the wall. I'll go back one here. Dean talked about this edge condition that we have that occurs along the railway track. What we thought was we'd extend the parapet wall of the parking structure up, begin to create a buffer from the harsh edge of the railway line and Jerry's parking lot, and then begin to look to landscape that edge. It'd be very nice for winter color, winter lights, but also create an environment where we could have that wall becoming a horizontal rock climbing wall. It could be a projection wall for film or festival. It could be a projection wall. It could be just a piece of art that is part of that space as well. But it also provides that sanctuary and respite from that harsher urban edge condition and begins to introduce a lot of those more peaceful and personal pedestrian spaces within the environment. So it's kind of a quick overview.
Good evening. Bill Neundorf with the city.
So you had asked for a quick update of our open houses. So we had not one, but 2 open houses scheduled this week. We added the second one because we had the big snowstorm on Monday. So we had a second one tonight. So the comments we heard at both open houses were very similar. The first evening we had 25 to 30 people attend. Most of the audience for this project was probably within a half-mile to a mile radius. So while the roads were slippery, many people still found it here. And then this evening we had, I would estimate, 80 to 100 people. We haven't actually formally debriefed because we just finished that one before we walked in the door here. But 3 comments, 3 trends stand out to me. People were concerned about the height. 17 stories is a big change. They were concerned about traffic, both traffic generated from a new project as well as every other traffic issue in the entire Grandview district, from the interlock and interchange to the school timing at the Lady of Grace, to walking across the bridge to get to from one side of the highway to the next, to the people queued up in line waiting to get into Starbucks on a weekday. So traffic was the second big topic of conversation. And then the third piece was a concern that it's time to do something. Just concern that, gosh, we've been talking about this for how many years? Didn't we try to do something a couple years ago? Are we ever going to do anything? How does a decision get made? So that was the third bucket of comments that I heard most vocally tonight. But certainly the biggest question, the biggest concern was height, and the second being traffic. That's the quick summary. We have our team assembled tonight. We've got representatives from the developer, from the architect. Michael Fry is here from the Art Center. Scott Neal is here as well. So we're happy to take your questions.
I think we want, are you willing to come and speak for the Art Center so we can kind of hear if your thoughts on this?
Madam Chair, how may I help you?
There was some questions about locating the Art Center here, and if this is something you've been involved, well, clearly you've been involved with, but what your thoughts are on if you like this location. And I guess I would ask too, are you comfortable having the transit station be kind of part of that too, the lobby, and using that as a park and ride? Yeah.
So to answer some of those questions, I'm Michael Fry, the General Manager of the Edina Arts Center, and I'm the staff liaison to the Arts and Culture Commission. The Arts and Culture Commission was presented with 3 different locations for the possible new art center in the city of Edina. One of them was the former Public Works site, Grandview, and the second was our existing site at the Edina Arts Center, where we are just south of the Crosstown Highway in Roslyn Park. And the third was when they're talking about the Southdale Library site possibly being involved in that site. The Arts and Culture Commission felt very strongly about the Grandview site, the former Public Works site. That was their choice, even when they were presented with the possibility of the Grandview Green. They preferred the Grandview former Public Works site. So I thought that was interesting. They decided not to be part of Southdale because Southdale is such a retail center, and as Commissioner Hamilton mentioned, that we're currently hidden, and to be hidden within a retail center, the Arts and Culture Commissioners were not favorable of that. And also to Commissioner Hamilton's comments, I very much appreciate that. We are a gem in the city, and for too long we've been a little bit hidden, quite a bit hidden. So I like to think of this project as the front door to Jerry's. I really like where the location is. I think it's an incredibly beautiful project. It's a well-designed project. Artistically, I think it's really nice, and we would be very proud to be part of this location.
Shirley?
So programmatically, Currently, how much square footage does the current art center occupy?
We have 10,150 square feet currently. We're a fine arts educational facility with a gift shop and a gallery. We currently have 2 galleries, the Margaret Foss Gallery and our smaller tea room gallery. So we focus on programming, drawing, painting, pottery, jewelry, photography, most of the fine arts. But in the past, we have had things like yoga for artists classes and salsa dancing. We've held salsa dancing at the senior center. We've had yoga for artists in one of our rooms at the Arts Center. Our population with the senior center is very similar, and so programming between those 2 entities is a really nice match, and I think we can reach a lot of individuals with our programming, with enhanced programming. We have things like the Author Studio, monthly readings from local and regional authors. So we've expanded quite a bit into doing different things, along with our 8 to 10 exhibitions each year. We have music in Edina. We have our Valentine's concert coming up. So we do a lot of artistic, cultural programming that I think would be a good fit here.
So it looks like it's being proposed that you would almost double in square footage. Is that a number? How was that number arrived at?
So we had worked back in 2015, 2016, when the Grandview Task Force was formed. We had worked with HGA Architects and Terry of Pros Consulting and George Sutton and Associates. And we had actually worked with Schuler Shook, a performance space company here in Minneapolis. And we decided that our current 10,000 square feet in a former home is not ideal. And everything is cut up the way we have it separated now. So we thought of doubling our current programming space. So that was an estimate of what we needed. This building is 30,000 square feet. The current senior center is about 15,000 square feet. So those numbers aren't quite exact, that 30,000 could be split up,
okay.
However.
Could you see some of that square footage being shared for other city use, public uses? So I'm trying to get my head around, is that an art center that kind of has to have a locked door by a certain time, classes are not being offered, the rooms can't be used? What's your thinking on that, on sharing some portion of that 20,000 square feet?
Ultimately the decision would be city council's, but from my perspective, we're open from 9 a.m. we hold classes until 9:30 p.m. So we're only closed on Sunday. We're open 6 days a week. So I think the possibilities are endless, and I'd be happy to, if someone came with some interesting ideas, to share space.
All right, how about financially? How does this supported? Do you receive funding, or are you self-sustaining through memberships or people who enroll in classes? How does that work?
Yeah, so we gain revenue from registrations, from memberships, from donations. I don't know of an arts organization that is 100% profitable. Maybe even the Metropolitan Museum in New York, they're really struggling. So we receive about 66% of our operating revenue from memberships and class registrations, which is impressive from an arts organization. We're doing good. 65% of our clientele comes from outside the city of Edina, interestingly enough. So we're really encouraging more residents of Edina to use our facility. And, I think, again, our children's programming is fantastic. We offer 83 summer camps for kids. Almost every one of them is full. But our adult programming, we'd like to get more residents from the city of Edina to take art classes with us.
So this being more of a public facility now, are you going to be expected to contribute 65% of the 20, now it's twice as big. Do you foresee there's going to probably be a real need to increase your membership to help support that, or are all the costs, any shortages are borne by the city coffers?
Well, currently, the remaining portion of our deficit is made up by the municipal liquor stores. So that's where we receive our additional revenue. You know, there's a couple of situations, because we're owned and operated by the city of Edina, we're not able to apply to state legacy grant funding. So there's some limitations there that really make it challenging for us, that there are grants out there that we're just not eligible for. So yes, city taxpayer funds would have made up the deficit for us.
Okay.
But as Dean had mentioned too, that you know, the option, we currently have 4 studios in the Arts Center that are rented, and they've been rented since I turned them into studios. So the Artist Loft combined with Artist Studios could be a great profit center for us.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. Okay. So do we have any questions for the applicant before we get into our discussion? Anyone? Commissioner Berube?
I have a couple questions kind of operationally. I'm unclear. First of all, I like the green space above the garage, and you're not seeing the cars, and your emphasis on the pedestrians and, you know, perhaps getting some public transportation in there. Help me visualize this. This is elevated from the street?
No. Now,
Okay.
let me go back to the site section.
Okay.
Hang on a second. Let me get back, because this is important.
While you're looking for it, I'll say, because what I'm thinking of is, you know, you have an art fair or whatever on top of that green space.
How do you get to it?
How accessible is that?
Okay, so let me go to this first, and I'll go to
Okay.
the other. See this line right here?
Yeah.
That's the grade of the site.
Yeah.
So at this end, which is basically where the Starbucks drive-through is,
Yeah.
that's going to be our access to the site. So let me go to a site plan right now. So bear with me when I get to it. The idea that works very well with this is that this is at grade. So vehicles, where it says Arrival Plaza, they can come in here and set up. So if you want food trucks touring this thing, so all our vehicle access is off on the top side of the site, so it can be serviced much like any other park or any facility coming up on what I call the Starbucks side.
Right.
So we designed it to have this kind of vehicular connection so it could be serviced, and then also the pedestrian connection. So it functions like any other park. You have direct access by car.
Because
to it.
if you're at that point on the corner, the southwest corner, you're like 3 stories up.
Exactly.
When you look over that wall.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So another tangential question to that is, in the artist loft,
Yes.
townhouses, there are no windows on their west side.
The west side is a corridor. All the windows are on the east side. Think of a
So they
single
only have
loaded.
windows on one wall.
Yes, but on the top floor, there's windows because those have direct connection to the park. But levels 1 and 2, no. So it's like apartment where you think the windows are on one side of an apartment. The same
Yeah.
idea. On the top,
So all
then you
your
have
all your
through-
artists are writers.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that Michael mentioned is what he's done is an intriguing idea, and it goes back to the revenue question. This studio rental, which he's had full of, again, he has a waiting list of 30 to 50 people that want to rent studios within the Arts Center. So there's actually a pent-up demand in Edina. So one idea that goes around what the larger building allows in sort of these townhouses, you can really develop a real artist community, because if you can imagine 30, 50 artists working on site
Yeah.
in studio rental, it gives you an income stream.
Yeah.
It also gives the presence of the artists within the facility,
Yeah.
creating and working. So there's sort of a beauty to this, and maybe the opportunity of living on site. And it really sort of gave them the opportunity of the open space expression, meaning the field and this hillside that faces south, but also the studio connection within it. So there is this ability to really build the Arts Center even greater than what Michael has done by the opportunity that's given by the additional space.
Okay. And then the flex space, 1F could, like, is that potentially retail or
Yes,
restaurant?
and the idea is, we call it flex because it could be a restaurant, could be retail, could be gallery. That the idea is that we want an active use at the base of the tower to keep enhancing the neighborhood.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Help me understand the district parking, please. We've got 490 cars, $13 million investment. Those cars don't exist in that neighborhood at this time now at all. There is no place for them to be. So when you finish it, all of a sudden we need 490 cars every day to fill it up. Where are they coming from and where are they going? Why are they there?
So here's the basic high-level summary of the cars at a preliminary basis. Assumption, and this is sort of based off the use of public facilities, based on the Arts Center and its use and the scale. That may be 100 cars.
Right now
Roughly.
it has 20 cars at maximum on site.
34.
Okay.
Okay, and based on expansion program. So, and that could vary up and down. These are just crude estimates, estimate. Senior center or adult activity, they're present, they've had peak demands up to 100 cars. So again, assume numbers as a high level to establish that. 100 cars, the park and ride. Because we know that from Metropolitan Transit Commission, they went on and actually did a count and came up with 100 cars that are basically parking through Jerry's and scattered about. So that's where that part, and that may be part of the funding to use that also as a park and ride facility to do that. And then beyond, if this Civic Green becomes the space that Terry, is programmed, there'll be a demand to serve that space. And if there's like a soccer tournament or art fair, we have to have that parking. So that's roughly where that number came from to support that. That could be trimmed or pushed or pulled. Well, sort of the basic high-level estimate of use and demand of these functions. Then, of course, parking the artist housing, because that would occur within that field of parking too. The condominium and or apartment, that's self-contained within the plates that are below that building specifically.
Okay. And that's the art center is a third the price of the parking garage. So although we should be concerned about where the revenue comes from for the art center, it seemed like to me a lot more concerned about where the revenue comes for the parking garage. There is no reason, should the lid ever continue, why this wouldn't be an integral part and feed into it smoothly.
And that's the idea, that this arrival plaza is that east-west connection. So if you think of the lid.
Begins there.
Exactly. That the idea is that there's a civic space west of the lid, and there's a lid as a primary civic space, and then look at the city hall as the civic space on the east side of the lid. So it's like two adjoining public spaces and then the primary one in the lid. So call this phase one of the lid as a possibility. It was designed to allow the lid to work and this connection to occur so that it could be part of that future. And if the lid is limited, like it's simply a pedestrian bicycle,
Yes.
It'll still allow that connection across.
Okay. One of the pieces that seems to make it understandable, feasible, financially reasonable is the segregation of the elements.
Yeah.
There are clearly 4 separate pieces here that are standalone pieces on one hand. On the other hand, the maximum use of site and value, and please don't tell Jerry's I ever said this, and they're delightful folks and a wonderful amenity, but that site across the railroad track is in desperate need of thinking about how it contributes to what you're doing here. There needs to be some changes.
Yeah, it goes back.
My point is, if I have one, that the density in the investment here, it seems like, wants to integrate those pieces, I think, even more than they are. It wants to get, they want that synergy of being together instead of separate entities collected on a site.
I agree with you 100%. Originally, and hopefully this is in the future, and this is part of the transportation network that was asked, this arrival plaza, and right now the city said, we have a ramp, entrances, exits, so forth, but the idea of creating a full street through here,
Yes.
which starts to tie this together. So right now, what's sort of the low-hanging, can we get it right away? We built this pedestrian connection across as a ramp and gets in the back of Jerry. Call
Yes.
that the short-term hit, to at least get it established. What's the long-term desire? This was designed to be a street, first link, and the hope is that this ties all the way across to start gridding the area and providing exactly what you're saying, this future opportunity that this area can be upgraded and start developing more to what it is presently. So where is the opportunity? Could be this city ramp, and here is a very good possibility. That's why I was starting to show that connection there. And then whatever happens to the Walgreens side, and you start to get this, and then as you cross this way, getting to the lid, to start making that connection, provide the developable parcels that occur. I can't agree with you more, but you got to start somewhere. And this, we thought, really plays the first move to start thinking beyond what's there today.
Maybe the only challenge that I see left there, just for me to get my head around, is I see the art center site as, the art center itself is just this engine for good. It does all kinds of wonderful things. And the bigger it is and the more prominent it is, the more it becomes a driver. Instead of a recipient of city funding, it begins to feed off and hear it to Jerry's because you're going to an art class, so you stop at Jerry's to get your yogurt to go home, or whatever it is that you're doing. But I want it to be a key piece to a bigger piece, and not a small piece to a small piece.
Hence the scale and the 30,000 and its presence, because you're absolutely right. You call it the jewel. What's the jewel? Because this is not an easy site.
No,
this
good
is
heavens, this is a hard site.
Leftover industrial gravel pit on the posterior of a lot of businesses. This is a tough site, and it really creates a aggressive move, hence the height and the plaza and all those things, the art center, to get it somewhere, because all the previous attempts sort of petered out because they couldn't quite answer, how do you deal with a site that is not a great site? It's a C site. Forgive me for saying it's a city, but it really is. So you need to really take a grander, bolder approach to set the site up so what's the back becomes the front, and sort of informs the rest of it to really create a vision. So yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. And that's why, and I give credit to the Arts Commission, because they made their decision independent of all of us.
Okay.
And they chose this site for the specifics of, gee, we'd love to be incorporated with the civic green, the hillside, and those elements, and opposite, as they say, they saw it as a great visibility because of the surrounding contents around it and the opportunity. But that was their own independent decision, as Michael said, without our prodding, poking, or anything. They just said, we like this, can you make it work? And so we've been working with Michael ever since to shape this into the project.
My last piece, honest. The affordable housing that is the artist lofts, I have a real hard time separating that as an entity. And you might as well put a sign on them and say, these are expensive high-rise apartments, but these are affordable. And I don't like that. I would like to find a way to say that they're integrated into the complex. And maybe that's where they are, but never again do we say that's where the affordable is.
Yeah, and they are, because I hear what you're saying. That's why what's the common complex is green. Everyone has access to the amenity, to the green, to the projects. I don't really see it as segregated. Just basically the idea is that it ties with the Arts Center and makes up part of this little
I think it could
civic
be a really
village.
fun place to live. Don't get me wrong. I think they have an interesting view. I think the connection to the Art Center could be delightful. The green could be delightful. The very simple fact that we hung a sign on them and said, affordable here, everybody else that's over there is not, doesn't make me happy.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Hobbs?
Yeah, first of all, I think just the overall design and layout I really like, so I appreciate that. And I guess, one thing in terms of the design of the Art Center, I think this is, I really agree with what John has said. This really has a great opportunity to be something special. Actually, if you go to slide 16.
Slide 16.
Oh, that works.
Yeah, okay, oops, sorry. There you go.
To me, this is kind of our opportunity to infuse a little Columbus, Indiana into Edina. And we should really think boldly, in my opinion, in terms of what we do with the Art Center. And I like even like this perspective. I like the stairs. It's kind of the Mayan pyramid thing going, which is kind of cool.
No human sacrifices.
Okay.
But, yeah.
That could be, kind of an event. But no. And I think, I guess I'm wondering, like for the landscaping, for some of those areas between the steps, that might be an opportunity to also have some native grasses, have something that is friendly for birds and pollinators, and kind of an educational opportunity there too. So, but I guess overall, I think this is just it's a tough site, and we have been talking about this for a really long time. So I think this is a great way it's all coming together. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Chair Thurston.
Sure. Well, one of the things when these big redevelopments come first, I always look at what could go in there without a lot of effort. And I think that's an important benchmark, because it's an empty site right now, so there's no traffic, there's nothing there. It's negative space in effect. And certainly, I understand the economics of this, and you need to put a certain number of units to make this viable. And I think the choice is clearly between, do you do it horizontally and kind of replicate what we saw with the active adult living and the old bus barn site, or do we go something dramatic and go up? And I think you want dramatic. It's in a commercial district right off a major highway. It's not abutting any residential areas. It's got pretty good infrastructure. I think it's probably one of the best sites in Edina for a more vertical, more dense sort of development. And I'm glad I'm not looking at another 6 5-story building that looks like every other building that's going on in the Twin Cities right now. Because I think that would miss the potential of this site. So I'm very supportive of that. I am incredibly supportive about wrapping the garage. I don't know why that does not happen more, that you don't hide the garage behind other buildings. And I understand the challenges of a townhome that only has windows on one side. I've lived in cities before and only had windows on one side, and you enjoy your 4 hours of direct sunlight a day. But I think you've done an amazing job. And when my daughter's a soccer player, I spend a lot of time on that field, and just to contemplate what's going to be there if this project goes through is quite incredible. I also look kind of at the Arts Center and the demographics. 55 plus is the fastest growing demographic in Edina.
Correct.
By far. And it's an interesting cohort because at 55, your kids have left the house. So you're starting to lose some of your connections you have with your neighborhood. You don't have sports, you don't have schools, you don't have all those activities. You're really becoming, I guess, free again. And you need to develop other connections. So I think a facility that allows that to happen, not just in the art sense, not just in we're going to do fitness classes, but allows that community to develop, I think would be an incredible amenity for that cohort within Edina, which I'm not quite there yet. And I said it's a very high quality building. I think you want to make a statement that this is Grandview. I would take a high quality high rise building over a stick framed on concrete 5-story building any day. And I do like the way you've not prevented the larger vision, the transportation issues in Grandview from being resolved, which there are many. I live in that neighborhood. I can tell you every single frustration of living there and trying to get around. And this, is I think step one to really putting some vitality into that in that part of Edina.
Thank you.
Commissioner Strauss.
Yeah, just kind of reiterating your points made. I think what I'm most impressed is the what the public is gaining, the citizens of Edina. From a plan view, I mean, 2/3 of the site is public usage, and I really like. It's page 42, which is just the uses of the field, which it's attractive just as a green space, but when you see the proposed schemes of things that's possible, when are we ever going to see a project that's providing something like this as a city? I mean, it's astounding. And then, I mean, and then even the gateway, the entrance. I just think there's just a lot of wonderful public space that's going to allow a lot of different sort of uses. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we were able, it was fortunate, credit to developers, they were able to turn the negative topography of the site into an asset. And that really was, took works. And so the places, this is really, if this sets up right, this really will really make Grandview that part of Edina that has a civic heart to it. I mean, right now there's uses and there's economic activity, but there's really no, back to Commissioner Hamilton's, there's no really element to it that makes it interesting except for filling your daily needs of grocery shopping, going to the stylists and things like that. But now this gets an overlay of a civic use because there's a big employment base in the area between Jerry's and all that. There's a big daytime population there. So that, I think, will really start to enhance what this area can become, which is good. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Bennett.
Oh gosh, I have a lot of things to say. Mostly good. Yeah, I just, right when I saw this plan compared to all the other things that we've seen that popped up over the past 7 years and discussions of sketches, this was the one I was just most excited about. Just visually right away, you kind of know that you guys got really creative. There's a lot of uses happening, and it's addressing a lot of gaps in that current area. So when you look at the guiding principles, and Sheila and I are working on the 44th and France small area plan, that's what we hope each development will be able to achieve. We lay out these things, and I mean, this framework was written not for one project to capture all 7, but this one, if you read through them, it pretty much nails all 7 of them to a T. So from what we're gaining is exactly what we intended to want to gain from this project. One component that I don't know was in the guiding principles, but something I've advocated for, I was on one of the community advisory teams, is there's just always been a place lacking in the Grandview area to stay. And it's always been this grab and go service-oriented vehicular kind of node. And where is there a place to stay? Hilltop remodeled, now it's getting real busy. But where is a place for everyone that uses that, which a lot of people use that area to just linger. And this offers a lot of opportunities. I really appreciate the shift of the building from the south side to the north side. You mentioned that before, but I want to reiterate how great that is, because before what was proposed were somewhat tall buildings on the south side, but that would block the south-facing sun for that courtyard to really get all the daylight, pretty much uninterrupted sun all day, which is really helpful for what you want to do sustainability-wise. And I guess one comment on the height, that will be the #1 comment people talk about. And I look back to when I was first involved in this area, when we recently moved to Edina. And, if I saw this plan 5 years ago, I would have just gasped in terror, like, what? This is way too tall. But after being on the Planning Commission and being through some of these development plans, and from what Commissioner Thorson brought up, we're starting to see the same kind of density, but just spread out, and we are losing the ability to make all these special commercial nodes a more urban place with connections and usable meeting spaces, gathering spaces. So now, you know, seeing that height like this can really open doors, and that's a beautiful building. And what that will do for Grandview is really make that a place. I tell people about Grandview, they're like, where? I'm like, oh, Jerry's. They're like, oh yeah, I know that.
Yeah, Jerry. Yeah.
So now people, I mean, this is the catalyst for really making this area a place, a recognizable place, not just for Edina, but other places that'll, hey, let's go to Grandview. Another thing, important element that wasn't really discussed, but this whole area has predominantly been a commercial node, and that's also what's kept it pretty special. So I know we talked about the flex space kind of having some sort of commerce aspect as well as the art center, but I also remember reading something about a potential like food hall. So I don't know if that's like under that kind of canopy facing the.
Correct. That's the opportunity to provide that.
So whatever we can do to kind of incorporate more of a commercial buzz kind of right at the base of that tower where all the people will live, as well as the people using this green space, the better. Let's see. Okay. So one comment about the Edina Art Center. So I've used the Art Center. I love art. I will be the person using that. I just from a cautious perspective, tend to worry about putting labels on certain things that house a bunch of different other opportunities for people. I mean, we say Active Adult Center, Edina Art Center, that's a lot to like communicate about a place. I wouldn't be opposed if there was an idea to, you know, just retitle this the community center, and those be a portion of it. You know, the Edina Art Center's in there, the Active Adult Center's in there, but then maybe there's also other gathering spaces, meeting rooms available. So someone within Edina is more apt to maybe check it out, as well as people outside of Edina that are just kind of moseying around the area.
That's a good thought. I get where you're heading with that. Broaden the audience.
Yeah, broaden the audience. We've talked, you know, there's a lot in a name, and we've talked about wayfinding things, different meetings before, and felt like we lost out on a couple opportunities to just simplify things for people. So if this one place has 3 places, let's just call it by one name instead of a bunch of different names. One thing that we've talked about a lot over the past few years is the name of this place is Grandview. So, you know, although the residents are all going to get this Grandview, how can we capitalize on some of that for the public? Like, is there going to be a focal area from that green plaza?
So right here, if you get up 3 stories to look south, there's a Grandview looking towards Our Lady Grace and beyond. And so that's the reason why the steps and why it was split like this, so that you have that view to the south over Our Lady Grace of Fields and the houses beyond. So, there is a nice promontory. You can see it when you go through the Starbucks drive-through. If you look through the weeded trees, there's a nice view through that element. And that's sort of where that idea came from, saying, God, there's a magnificent view up there, just covered by scrub trees, junk, and everything else. And so the thought of this and the amphitheater stuff in there was to do exactly what you're saying, to play that up.
So I like that. I guess my other challenge would be, you know, I guess the Grandview I expect was always, you know, of downtown and the, you know, the magnificent sweeping views you could see. So I don't know if there's a way for the public, and, you know, maybe it's a rooftop dining thing above that flex space, or even like a rooftop restaurant at the top of the whole tower that now everyone can see the Grandview. So, I mean, I just feel like we can't forget about the Grandview. I mean, that's the title of this thing, and now there's a huge tower kind of blocking that Grandview of downtown. So, from another drawing, it looked like the Edina Art Center, that building was featuring a green roof of some kind, and
Yeah,
so.
and the idea of that is, the plan is the roof to be what I call an active roof, which could be, because the thought is we could have the kilns up there, for
Yeah.
example, because these are elements within it. And so the roof space, and what's sort of important, it's sort of about your grand view. What do people look down upon? And what
Yeah.
can the roof become, a little bit to your idea of having visibility? So the thought was to have the roof be active. So the idea, could kilns be up here, class elements like that. So that was the thought. Why
Yeah.
I showed it as a green roof to mean it will be an active roof that will
Okay.
serve functions that.
Because it seemed
come
like it
within
was
the Arts
asking
Center.
for it, but
Yeah.
I didn't hear it mentioned. And perhaps from that roof, you could still see downtown
Yeah.
until other tall buildings get built, I'm sure. As for the housing, you mentioned it wasn't decided between apartments and condos, and
Correct.
and I don't know, just personally, and maybe from what we heard from people that, you know, were on the fence about the whole Estelle development, was one nice thing that offered was ownership. And so, you know, that's a great opportunity here to just have people have ownership of this place a little more when you live there.
And what we're looking at, the housing service, the idea that, you know, as we study it, ownership and or long-term rentals. You know, the
Yeah.
apartment market's always breaking things up to 1-year segments. They never offer an option that says, what if you could lease your apartment for 5 years and customize it? So you sort of have a little bit of the best of both worlds. So we may end up with what I'm going to call a hybrid within this, because you know, the market's always said year rental, year lease, and after a while I say, well, why? Why not a 5-year term or something, so you can have a little best of both worlds of people that feel comfortable buying. People say, I want a long-term place to live, but I don't want to make that commitment. There may be a way that you sort of satisfy both audiences out there. So that's some of the thinking that's gone into the housing that's within this project.
I know Bill or Carrie mentioned that it might be on, it should meet affordable housing, but I won't mind a bolder push if, you know, this is part of the HRA's kind of project, you know, upwards of 15% instead of 9%, you know, just, and maybe incorporating some of the tower just to kind of bridge some of what Commissioner Hamilton was talking about. And then I guess the last thing is really about the transportation. We just got out of a meeting talking about active transportation, and at least looking around this site, maybe because there's no signage just about entrances, making some things a little more prominent and clear to really encourage, since this will be the catalyst, really encourage people who are walking around or biking to easily find where they ought to go. Because if you come up that south side, you might get a little confused.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's going to be an escalator taking people up Arcadia.
Well, yeah,
but-
no, what there'll be 2 elevator towers, stair towers, so someone cannot walk up the hill. They have access here and here to provide that connection within it. Then I'll see the steps that top of your, but the idea in terms of circulation, is that, you know, the grand stairs, you know, part of his architecture, part of it was to really say, you're welcome here. You know, a little bit of the Mayan thing. You want to climb to the top. It's just instinctive, less the sacrifice. But the idea is that you can climb up, access, and orientate through that. So that is the idea. It's a major entry point here that's opposite the Highway 100 exit, and then this loop road down here. So, yeah, we're developing the idea to try to make the site as porous as possible so that people flow through it, and then hopefully some stay. And that's sort of the basic thought behind this.
I guess since most of, you know, the southern portion's a public component, one of the things, part of that bike and pedestrian plan was the education piece and having wayfinding. So, you know, maybe this project could be a pilot from on the city standpoint to really have better intentional signage if you're walking or biking of, you know, on each of the corners, you know, this way to this location, that way to City Hall, whatever. And then I guess for the programming, just really appreciate all the different uses. Just seeing how that green space can be set up is just incredible. And when you're talking about the Twin Cities doesn't have an asset like this, it's pretty awesome to think that this will be that close to home and we can all use that, and the stairway to get up to there is just, it's magnificent. One thing for the programming, I recall there was like a projection wall. Where was that slated
so let
to
me
be?
show you. Let me show you that, because it's part of the idea back to, gee, this is a difficult site because it's the back end of everything, and part of it was for microclimate. So you see right here, this green wall that's shown right here.
Yeah.
The back side of this is a service, it's a service entry of Jerry's. It's the municipal ramp and waterworks. So the idea is to extend a wall here that Terry mentioned, and it provides too, and it gives the space some intimacy and a green backdrop against what's really a lot of concrete block. That's beyond it, but also serves to create a nice microclimate here, protecting against the west and northwest winds. So this area has a nice scenic stability, less wind blowing through it because it is up a little higher.
Yeah.
So this serves the idea of giving protection to it, so the space is more usable longer time of the year. Facing south and screening the wind, the space can be usable, in October quite easily, even early November, and even in winter activities, it won't be brutal if it knocks out the wind chill out of it. So it extends its use basically and provides an environment that's more comfortable, and you don't feel like you're the backside of Jerry's anymore.
So one of the images shown had like a rink. Is there winter programming similar to that feasible?
There could be, yeah. It's set up that could have, and it depends on the Edina Parks Department, and the park director said, "Oh no, Dean, no more ice rinks." But it's just like, but there could be other functions beside just ice rinks within this. So let me go to Terry's images here. So yeah, there can be extension, so it can be beyond just that on this. So the idea is it does have a winter, summer, because one element that we're talking about, which the Twin Cities does not do a very good job of, Christmas fairs. If you ever been to Bryant Park, New York, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, places like that, they have these Christmas fairs, which vendors set up little kiosks and sell Christmas-oriented stuff like that. We don't have it here, but it's very common, and it's even more so in Europe. So part of the idea is this could be a great site to allow that to occur, the Edina Christmas Fair, in which that would occur. So, those are thoughts to really have a seasonal, all-around year programming active uses out of this.
Great. And my last comment with programming and, with the Art Center, I really appreciate how many programs they have for kids. I think you mentioned 83 summer camp programs that everyone signed up for. So I encourage more things to integrate kids into the mix, just with the Active Adult Center and what tends to be the expected crowd of the Art Center. Just there's a demographic that isn't being served outside of athletics.
Yeah. And that was the idea, and that's what's so nice about this contained space. It's safe.
Yeah.
It's manageable for youth activities.
Yeah, all in all, just a beautiful, beautiful development proposal. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Just a few quick comments. This is a very unique solution. I know it was really a strenuous site exercise, and I am impressed as well as that you were able to make it come together. I like the separation of the elements. To me, I like the separate identities, and I think that feels right. So I'm glad to see that there is some additional different housing types showing up here. I think we've been getting just a lot of the same. So what this example shows is really, this is a very good example of the get to give. And many times we're mulling on why so high? What determines the height? Here it's all about, with that height, we got that green space. So I think it's very justifiable in that stance, and I don't have, for once, no qualms about the height, because it's so clear, it's so evident what we get with it.
This is being recorded, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
So I would agree with Commissioner Bennett that I like the thought of it being more of a community center. I know that the school district is expanding. The current community center is owned by the school district, and it really is just a repurposed school.
Yep.
So I don't think anyone in the city thinks of it as our community center. It's a place where you go to sign up for a few classes. I like the idea of potentially really focusing on, as you get into this, looking at it programmatically, what's happening in there. There was some great data that came out of the prior public engagement that talked about really kind of almost like, what am I looking for? Not fitness, but almost like lifestyle, health and wellness.
Yep.
So you could have, even plots of small gardens or something to show things like that. And maybe it would even merit. I mean, here I'm going with height, but maybe another story. I don't know if it would add, after programmatically looking at what we want to be able to encompass in there. I appreciate the fact that I think this almost does have a very good segue from the last round, that I do sort of remember a tower element and a central entrance point into the center of the site, and something happening, down at the lower end, and I do recall it being flipped, and then the parking. So I think it's important that when we move forward as developing this programmatically, that those get emphasized, because it's important for the public to understand that this is the involvement of all that came before it. And I think you did an excellent job of picking up on that and not ignoring it. So I'm glad to see it reinforced here in living color. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Nemiroff.
Thank you. Thanks for the team for the work. So yeah, this is a nice, very interesting project. And I have a variety of comments, questions. Some of my comments are very positive. Some I'm not. I'm kind of mixed. So just some general questions. In no particular order. The Art Center, I totally see the need for that, and it sounds like a good plan. As to the design, I'm sure you're going to come up with something that's mutually agreeable to the developers and to the city. Yep. In case not everybody knows, I mean, Mr. Frey was talking about, they're packed, and it's an old house, and they're very busy. And right now, to get from room to room, you walk down a hallway that was designed 60 years ago. It's not really functional for the modern era, and I think there's a general acceptance among all of us here that it's a very successful program, and let's feed our winners a little bit and grow our winners, and I think that makes sense. Our senior center is a successful program also, but it was just built, and it's an adequate facility. So I'm just wondering what the perceived need is, why we need to move or add to the senior center.
So it came from Ann, the director of parks, and who actually works with the program in various buildings. There's been a big evolution at senior centers. It doesn't mean you're replacing the existing senior, maybe added to, but in terms of activities, meeting functions, a little bit goes back to your comment of community centers and rooms and functions. Because the present senior center, nicely built, is basically, a series of white sheetrock rooms. I mean, there's some character to it, but now they're getting a lot more in terms of activity, the yoga, meetings, functions, intimate meeting spaces, business centers. You think of all those functions that has evolved quickly. And so the idea is, can we augment what we have by, in that sense, the term adult activity center, because it's really based on that. So it's not so much like you're replacing, it's really enhancement and having the ability to work that. And the other thing about seniors, or really community, is connection to other activities, which was a big deal. The Arts Center is a natural segue that really allows that to happen, because most people immediately have an instinct of art and understanding of it. And so that was the idea of this hybrid enhances both stronger. And that's really, it wasn't so much like the present senior center is bad. It's more of how can we enhance the adult activities even better. And so that's really what this is built upon.
Oh, so it sounds like it's a combination of like three things. Like Todd said, there's a growing population that could use a senior center. Since the current one was built, there's new uses for senior centers that have been identified, and you see a good synergy, to use a terrible killed buzzword, but it might be appropriate here, a good synergy between putting co-locating a senior center with the art center. That's kind of the thinking.
Exactly.
That makes sense. A couple weeks ago, we received kind of a high-level overview of this site. Mr. Neuendorf gave it, and one of the things that was mentioned as it didn't really get a lot of love in the tone was a food court. It's like, well, we might do a food court, we might not. I don't see that here. Is that still on the plans, or is that kind of sliding away?
It sounds like small hamburger sliders, but here's the idea that we're thinking. The reason why the space was set up the way it is to allow cars to come into it. So let's say food's a function. We set this up so maybe initially it's a series of food trucks. See how it works. Very easy. Food truck festival. They can come in on the side, ring this thing, and build off of that. If it really roots, you go further. If not, it stays for what it is. So that's how I made the space flexible, to have that ability to test these different ideas and see what takes and how the community develops and evolves. So it is an element, but it's really going to start by probably the food trucks coming in, seeing how the public reacts to it, and then build from there. If you think of a traditional food hall like being built downtown, no, that's a stretch. If you think of Zimmerman's deal in the old Dayton building, there you got 185,000 workers, you got a density that can drive something like this. Edina is probably more of an event-based food hall, using food trucks or outside vendors to set it up, tent the site, have it, may last a week, and then it goes away. So that's probably the level this will be at to start with, and then we see how it goes from that standpoint.
Well, that makes sense. So it sounds like, though, in terms of with the construction, building a dedicated space for a food court, that's probably not in the plans. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But the ability to hold temporary events, that is in the plans.
That makes sense. That might be fun. That might be a fun way to do it, because then you might be able to get a lot more variety than you'd get with you at a food court too.
Exactly.
The green area, really like it. It's very attractive. One of my kids got to look at the plans over the weekend, was really excited by the trees. I had to say, well, those are just drawings, but it really isn't. The concept is exciting. The appearance is exciting. I'm trying to get my head around the size. I'm trying to think about what's comparable in size. And
football field.
One thing that came to my mind is like we have the lawn bowling area at Centennial Lakes.
Yep.
How does this compare in size to that?
Well, if you look at a football field, that's really the scale of the space.
Okay.
In terms of that, and that's the rough size of it. And then, the idea of trees and stuff, the middle was meant to be like the high active uses. But the thought is we berm and develop the perimeter so it's rung by trees and plantings and flowers and things like that, perennials. The center stays active. And then this hillside really provides a bunch of activities, because this will be deep section earth, a little bit the way the ring is, so we can get full trees come up in those areas. In the middle, that's on top of the park ramp, is going to be more for the active uses like lawn bowling, food courts and stuff like that, or food festivals. By that, so that is, we can sort of get both open space but also mature landscaping by playing with the earth sections on the project.
So it's about the size of a football field.
Yep.
It's larger than the lawn bowling area
Yes.
over at Centennial.
Exactly.
That hill you could use for sledding, right? You could put
They may end up in Eden Avenue. That may not be, but it's a little tricky there.
You have the artist lofts there, then you have the driveway, and then there's a little sidewalk. And it looks better in this image than it does in another image. That little sidewalk to the south on the other side of the artist lofts across the driveway.
Oh, you mean here?
Right, you had it there.
Yeah. And that's the idea. This is the drive entrance and delivery entrance and back pedestrian entrance to the Arts Center. Because the idea, the Arts Center needs service, delivery of clays and stuff like that. So there's a loop road that goes through here. You also get into the ramp that way. And I haven't developed all the landscaping elements within that entry, but that's all going to be part of the further development of this.
In some ways, that looks really nice, but one thing that struck me as I saw it is that it looks like something, it just struck me, and I'm not, this is your field, not mine, but it just struck me in the wintertime that could become a dark, slippery area with a lot of melt and lack of sunlight. And so I don't, maybe there's things that can be done about that, with that sidewalk area, just by the
shared, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
that.
Are you referring to this or this here?
Yeah, I mean the walkway out of the garage, it just with the large retaining wall, it just looked like a great place for a lot of snow to
drift in,
pile up and get slippery. And I'd like to think of maybe there's a solution for that.
Okay.
The height of the building, I agree with several of the commissioners. I think this is a great place for density. The drawings you've submitted are attractive. I really like the idea of a rooftop restaurant so everybody can see downtown. That would be an awesome thing for the city of Edina to have a restaurant on the 17th floor where you can see downtown. I mean, that would be a New Year's Eve, and wow, you have to get your reservations long in advance. The one question I do have about the building is, obviously this is a sketch plan review. If you come before us for a regular review, I would hope that you'll have a shadow presentation.
Study. You mean of materials or shadows?
No, I mean, the one neat thing about where this is structured is it appears to me, again, I'm not an expert, but that the shadows from the building as the sun goes through the sky are going to fall on the backs of retail buildings.
Correct.
Maybe in the afternoon at certain times of the year they might fall upon the entrance to Washburn McReevy.
Yeah.
But it would be good to see. Before saying, "Oh yeah, let's go with this height," it would be good to see
a shadow.
A real
we
shadow
are
study.
planning on doing a shadow study with this. That will be part of it.
I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. I share some of the. I'm trying to follow on the parking. I'm trying to follow the math, and I'm kind of concerned, kind of confused. It seems like we're doing fewer spaces than code for the residential, but then we're also going to have uses from the arts center, and then we're going to have a park and ride. And so but it sounds like it works out, and the city's okay with it.
It does balance out.
Okay.
Maybe those times because, and again, the idea is try to get this parking to be shared uses as much as possible. So, because the whole trick about this, there's some elements about this that have peak demands. The Arts Center's peak demands during art show. The green will create peak demands on there, and elements obviously park and ride. So the idea is we try to program this so those spaces have a lot of turns to them on it. And that's sort of the idea that they get used for multiple functions, not individual functions, except for what's below the tower. That group of spaces reserved for that, but the rest of it's meant to be very fluid. So as uses come and go, those spaces come and go in terms of intensity. So you're not duplicating parking over and over again.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sure you've worked through it. The affordable housing, there are 27 units, and that sounds great. The concern I do have, however, about the affordable housing is that we've been, and it's not, this is probably much more of a city question than it is a question for you, Mr. DeVos, or a comment similarly, is we've been discussing affordable housing for a long time, long before this project was built. And in my head, and that definitely is not where policy should be created for anyone other than myself, but in my head, I had, and in my understanding, I don't think this is something I created, is I had envisioned that the affordable housing that we'd be developing in the city of Edina would be something that would be for service workers of the, for example, people work for the fire department, people that work for the police department, people work for the schools that have families but wanted to live in Edina. And so on the one hand, I like it. I think it's great we're going to have 27 units. But on the other hand, I feel kind of disappointed, especially because I know that in other projects, we have said, oh, you don't need to build. We'll do this in lieu of project, and we'll put that housing somewhere else. And I feel like with this, this was kind of the place to do it. So I feel like we're kind of losing our opportunity, if not here, to build affordable housing for the people that, don't make big money, and so I'm kind of conflicted about that.
Meaning more?
I'm sorry?
Or meaning more of it, or?
Well, I think
I'm trying to.
Well, it seems like it would be great to have more affordable housing, and it would be great to have it open for service workers, like police, police.
Yes, and we call it arts because we hope there's some relationship to the Arts Center, but the assumption is it probably will be a combination of both, because obviously the reason why I do affordable housing, especially if you go 6 for median income, it's about an income that comes about $40,000. It supports people just like that, which is a lot of your teachers, aides, so forth. So the thought is, it may not be strictly restrictive hours. Obviously, that would be an element that enhances it and an opportunity, but the idea is that it would have a variety of residents. Some would be exclusive, like an art space, which is strictly artists. Hopefully, it'll have a bit of a mix in it, and that's the thought.
But that is even then, that is kind of a disappointment to a family, because then you're saying, well, you're gonna, if you're a police officer and you want to move here, you're gonna say, yeah, but it's really not architected for family living. You're going to get minimal sunlight. If you're a writer, you're an artist, and you're using the artist facility, it's more conducive to that lifestyle. But to the lifestyle of a family raising a kid, it's
no different than an apartment, essentially. Light on one side. It's not a true townhouse, but then that eats up too much real estate. So it's sort of the compromise. It could be more expensive units, or more units at one side light. So we chose more units to create more opportunities. That's how it sort of fell down, which makes it a little tougher on families, but you still have access to a big park. So in some ways, the affordable housing here has actually access to a lot of nice facilities in the Arts Center, the community center, the park, and all that. That really makes it really a nice element, location for families.
Well, you make a lot of good points. I feel kind of mixed about it, but you make thank you for the discussion. You made good points. The final issue I have with this property is just the nature of the transaction being a public-private transaction. I think that's a more complicated transaction than just selling it. So I guess this question would probably be for the city also, or if the city what are the unique, there's a lot of unique benefits, I think, that are coming with this transaction. As I'm hearing it tonight, I'm trying to piece it together. Whereas the city, there's a lot of give to get here that the city may not otherwise do if it did not do the public-private transaction. We're getting the new arts center that the city may not have been able to fund development on if we hadn't done the public-private and other things. But then, and so that's all good, and this is probably another mixed thing, but then I think there's some unique risks of public-private also, and I don't know, has the city thought through those risks, what the potential risks are of doing public-private and steps to mitigate those risks?
The answer is, Scott's not here, but Bill can jump into it. But there has been discussions. This hasn't come about lately, but I'll let Bill answer this in terms of that.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if I have a really crystal clear answer for you this evening. Certainly over the 10 years or so that we've talked about the site, the initial plan was to sell it back in 2006, 2007. that plan was scuttled because I think the overall opinion was that the city wanted more control in what ends up on that site. So by entering into a public-private partnership and having, kind of this co-development, we get that control. Had we just sold this, I don't think we'd have an art center. We wouldn't have a shared parking garage. We wouldn't have a transit center. We wouldn't have a giant park on the roof. That being said, there are lots of intricacies in that public-private partnership. At this point in time, we've really been focusing on the site planning and the layout and these elements. So we're still in that sketch plan phase. We're here tonight at Planning Commission. We'll be at City Council in a couple weeks. If there is general support for this direction, then our team really needs to start rolling up our sleeves and figuring out the business deal. At this point, those deal points have not been identified. So the risks that you ask about it, at this point, I don't have a full-blown risk analysis or anything of that nature. But certainly, as the city has done public-private deals over the decades, there's always little things that show up. I mean, with the Centennial Lakes project in the 80s, with the Edinburgh Park in the 80s, with Grandview Square and the library and the senior center. One of the things we found there is our shared parking arrangement at the current senior center doesn't work out as well as we thought it would have. As we've been working on the Market Street project over at 50th and France right now, that's a public-private arrangement. And, we just started construction a couple weeks ago, and now some of these tensions are rising to the forefront with two contractors operating in the same space where businesses are still operating and traffic still needs to get through. There's some tension with that, so there's those types of risks. So with this project, when the time comes, of course, we'll need to address each and every one of those, but we're definitely not at that point today.
Thanks, Bill. That's all I had. Thank you.
All right, well, I agree. I like this plan. At first, when I looked at the 17 stories too, I'm like, but I really, what we're getting in, return for that, I support that. When you come back, or if you come back, I'm pretty sure we're going to see you again. But let's talk about Arcadia. I know it's really tight there with the setback, and you're building up against the parking ramp. And so, what potential, what flexibility do you have to provide more setback and to accommodate that bike and ped that we're showing?
So Carrie made light of it, that 10 feet, there's an easement that's undefined. If that comes in our favor, we're going to push the whole project to the west.
Okay.
10 feet, which will really help open this up. And so that's what we're hoping for, is that easement is a city-controlled easement, not a railroad-controlled easement.
Okay.
And if it falls in our favor, we'll claim it, and this all moves further to the west 10 feet.
And if it is the railroad,
then I may have to
then-
shorten townhouses, I may have to modify the depth
Okay.
of the units a bit to make it work.
Okay, so yeah, when you come back, it'd be good to have more details on how that's the active street there, and and just also make sure that those kind of are really nice looking too, the affordable, to jazz them up also.
Yep.
Let's see, I really appreciate that you are maintaining the park and ride. I know we've been working with Metro Transit, and that's the location they want to be, and having a park right there, so that's great. Just the last one too is there's that little surface parking by the Art Center.
Yep.
Is that, we have to have that?
That was very important to Michael.
Okay.
That there's a certain amount of, and that's referring to right here, there's a certain amount
Yep.
of people that come for more quick visits, is I need some convenient spaces. So that's how that got established as part of the program with the Art Center.
Okay. So, okay. Those quick in and out parking stalls
Correct.
couldn't be accommodated within the parking structure? I'm just thinking that's, you could continue that whole corner as public space.
No, and that's true. You can see them right here, and that's
Yep.
a reference. But, Michael said, I need a few of these. So that's how, now maybe we can enhance them, green them
Okay.
up, pavers, things like that, to give it an appearance. Because what we haven't gotten into yet in terms of this development, this drive through, and it goes back to, is it pavers? Is a higher grade material to really change the effect so it appears, even though it may contain cars, it reads more like a plaza? That's the level of design I've not put into that yet that will be coming. So that really feels like a pedestrian environment under there. It happens to have some cars that may park there. So the idea of how I enhance this with the materials, landscaping elements like that will be a key part of making sure this is as pleasant to what's occurring on the outside.
Okay. Well, maybe give it one more look and just see what ability you have. Also then, when you come back to, if you could provide plans that show how it's really connecting to like the new development to the west and, the other, surrounding properties.
Yeah.
I know we just kind of have boxes, but if we could kind of show how on Eden Avenue and how, if there's going to be bike and ped in front of you, or how that's connecting and do that, connection
There's
throughout.
the streetscape development, and to fully show you how this connection goes
how
through
it
the
all
ramp
works.
that connects to the back of Jerry's.
And east
that's
and west,
going to be key parts of this.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Hobbs?
I said one thing to ask for Bill, and it came up when Jamie was talking about the name. Has the city thought about the potential of selling the naming rights to the Arts Center as a way to help fund this? Has that ever come up?
The Vola Center sounds sweet.
I thought I heard a donation for the Hobbs Center. That's certainly a creative option. At this point, we haven't gotten to that level of detail, but certainly I think one of the strengths of the Edina community is the philanthropic nature of many families. So I think especially for a civic use, a public use, that serves multiple generations for multiple types of things. I think there certainly is that potential. So if we decide to proceed, I think there would be some type of outreach campaign in that regard.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Give us your new address. We'll make sure that
you
get
bet.
a flyer.
The check's in the mail.
Just had one final comment, maybe more for Bill, but it just seemed like the comments you got at the public outreach meetings that we had today and Monday seemed to address the three topics of height, traffic, and finally, something's happening. So I don't know if there's a way, at least with the next package you put together, to have maybe an easier to digest, of the get to give of like what the city is really getting here for that height. And then also to just kind of strike away the notion of traffic impacts, because what we're doing here is kind of addressing those with the potential commuter transit station, park and ride, as well as locating a bunch of people right off the freeway. So, just easy nuggets that people can just read and then be like, oh, okay. Because it seems like, that's going to be most of the comments that we'll hear too, just from neighbors and other residents.
A great suggestion. If we decide to come back, we'll certainly up the game and provide more information in that regard.
Cool.
Bill, so could you explain again, what was the third point? Was it expression of surprise that something was happening, or was it more like impatience, like finally?
Yeah, it was more the impatience perspective. Okay. I think over the years, a lot of people have grown weary. I spoke with a couple folks this evening that had specifically moved to this area a couple years ago because they heard about the Grandview framework discussions. They saw some of the pretty pictures. They moved to this area or stayed in this area because they were hoping that these old industrial sites would change. We heard comments about this area is overdue for reinvestment. It's overdue for a facelift. A lot of these long-term infrastructure traffic problems have been here for years or decades. It's time to get them fixed. The site's been vacant for many years. It's time to do something. So it was more in that line.
Well, so I just have one comment. If this should come to pass, I think that the city should feel good about just taking its time. Honestly, there was a long, lengthy public engagement process, and I think right now seeing the result of what we have today is is about as good as you could get. And I hope that for our residents who are involved in that process, that they recognize that this has so much to add to the city, and the city did not act hastily, in my opinion. Probably a lot of people's opinion, but there was a reason behind it, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your help.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so next on the agenda is the 2018 Comprehensive Plan Update Status Check-in. Is that something?
Open.
That was that I had suggested that we just have that as a standing agenda item. Now that we've got several small area plans in the works, so that the co-chairs would just make an update at a standing update at every planning commission meeting. I can start. Well, actually, one of the things I wanted to point out is that we are in our final leg of this journey, and yet 50th and France will start soon. It would be important to really flesh out timelines and work with a consultant to understand that. So that's something we're trying to do in 70th and Cahill. I think 44th and France probably understands now when it's coming to our planning commission to be reviewed. But those kind of things, and I guess I'm also saying it knowing that 50th and France is going to be starting soon, that if this process, and I don't see how it can take anything less than 6 to 7 months, that proactively we need to be thinking about when do we want to start that process as far as getting the notification out to form that next working group. As well, when does that actually come before our planning commission for review or the comprehensive task force? And we certainly don't want to overburden our consultant and have all these crashing deadlines, everything due in October when the Greater Southdale plan is also going to be wrapping up. So anyways, that's just sort of my one point at this point. Obviously, once 50th and France gets going, we'll know what it means as far as our 70th and Cahill. So for our 70th and Cahill, we are going to have our next, our second of 3 public engagement meetings, so that will be the one where we are actively seeking. We're going to be proposing some scenarios. So that typically is the second meeting is the one that's well attended, and people are there to see, well, what are they thinking? So we are trying to find a way to document all the comments and the feedback, because obviously by the time we come back for the third meeting, it's called Progress Update, and it's essentially saying, we heard ya, and so here's the plan, this is the direction. So we obviously want agreement or build consensus from that second meeting to the third is key. So that's where we're at, and we're on track to actually, our report will be coming before the Planning Commission, it looks like at the May 23rd meeting, and that might actually be a task force meeting too as well, I don't know, depending. I noticed that we had received Comprehensive Plan Council check-in dates from Carrie. Those are our next meetings with the council on the comp plan? Okay, so we had a few that were tentative, but I see 70th and Cahill is up February 21st, so that's when we would plan to make a sort of report. Okay, and then Southdale is on May 1st. I would say July 17th then is 50th in France. So there's your first date. You'll be reporting on 50th in France on that date. So you can back it up in the calendar and just kind of know when it'll make sense when you have to start. I think you're probably looking to start sometime in March, but that's something, again, you might want to check with a consultant, or hopefully he's ready to talk to you guys soon. Anyways, all right, so we have 5 more meetings. Comp plan, check-in with the council, and that's also with the consultant.
Correct. Now, if we need more, there's some opportunities potentially.
Okay.
They have a very busy schedule.
Okay, thanks.
We can give an update on the 44th in France. The consultant is in the process of consolidating thoughts, notes, feedback on the initial draft. He is to send that out this Friday, the 26th. And then the team will have 2 weeks to review and send back any additional comments, any, whatever. One of the big things he's working on now is getting a really robust executive summary. We wanted things to be, 3, maybe 5 pages. So, you've got the real nut of what you need to read right in those pages and have very clear, what you might call give to gets. So that it's very clear you don't have to go through 70 pages to figure out what's going on. So he's tasked with doing that, getting it back to us on Friday. The comments are due within 2 weeks of that. And then, hopefully being able to have it back then to staff. And then we'll present, I believe we're scheduled to present on the 28th of February, which was pushed back from the 28th of January because the consultant was delayed in getting some of the comments back from our participants. So I think I have those dates right, if you've got them in front of you, Carrie. I think those dates are right.
That's correct.
That's right, yeah.
Will you have a public review period?
It is scheduled to have a public review.
Yeah, well,
right?
when it's distributed to the commission for
Yeah.
our review, we would, then
Yeah.
put it out for public review.
I was wondering if we might, before it comes to us, that we know what the public review was.
You mean what the
Comments
feedback
or
was?
feedback, yeah.
I'm not sure what the process is for that.
So when we say it's coming to you, it's not the public hearing, we're discussing it at the work session. So there's a period of time, from the time you get it, that we make it public, you get to review it. There's still more time after that before that public hearing is held.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, and you heard about Southdale, so I think we're set on that one. And you're on the group, so we got that one covered. Any correspondence, petitions, chair, member comments, other than that?
Is this your last meeting?
Is it?
No.
No.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So my effective date of resignation is March 1st.
Okay.
So I'll be here through February.
Yes. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to miss Steve.
Thanks.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.